Chapter 1. Some moments arrive like lightning, sudden, brilliant, and powerful enough to illuminate everything you thought you knew about your life in a single, breathtaking flash. For Miles Westbrook, that moment came disguised as the most ordinary thing imaginable, stepping into the wrong elevator on what should have been the most important day of his career. Picture this: the 42nd floor of downtown's most prestigious medical center, where glass and steel stretch toward heaven like a monument to human ambition. Miles Westbrook stands in his corner office, all 6 feet 2 inches of him radiating the kind of controlled power that makes grown men in $1,000 suits shift nervously in boardrooms. His Rolex Submariner, a gift to himself after his first $1 million deal, catches the morning light as he checks the time for the third time in 2 minutes. 9:47 a.m. In exactly 13 minutes, his entire world could change forever. The acquisition papers spread across his mahogany desk represent more than just another business deal. They represent vindication. Proof that Adrian Westbrook's son had finally become worthy of the family name. Proof that all those childhood nights spent listening to his father's disappointed sighs through thin bedroom walls had forged him into something unbreakable. Something successful. Something enough. His phone buzzes with the sharp insistence of incoming doom. Danny Collins. The name alone makes Miles's jaw tighten with barely controlled frustration. Collins, he answers, his voice carrying the Arctic chill that had earned him the nickname, Ice King, in business circles. Miles, my old friend. Danny's voice drips with false charm. I trust you're having a lovely morning, because it's about to get very interesting. I've just made Oakley Industries an offer they can't refuse. Seems they're not as impressed with your humanitarian reputation as you hoped. Miles feels his carefully constructed composure crack around the edges. Oakley Industries. The acquisition that would cement his legacy, transform Westbrook Industries from successful to legendary. The deal that would finally silence his father's ghost and prove that choosing compassion over cutthroat tactics hadn't made him weak. The papers are signed, Collins. The deal is done. Oh, Miles. Danny's laughter sounds like breaking glass. Nothing's done until the money clears. And I have it on good authority that your bleeding heart approach to business has some of your investors concerned. Seems they think you've gone soft. Lost your edge. Started caring more about sick children than profit margins. The words hit their intended target with surgical precision. Miles's free hand clenches into a fist, his knuckles white against the tailored charcoal of his suit. Through his floor-to-ceiling windows, the city sprawls below him like a chessboard where he's about to lose his queen. 48 hours, Miles. That's how long you have before I make Oakley an offer that makes yours look like pocket change. Hope your conscience keeps you warm when you're explaining to your shareholders why you chose feelings over fortune. The line goes dead, leaving Miles staring at his reflection in the phone's black screen. The man looking back at him has his father's steel-gray eyes and granite jawline, but something else lives in that reflection now. Something that hadn't been there before he'd started secretly funding the pediatric wing of this very hospital. Something that looked dangerously like hope. He grabs his briefcase with movements sharp enough to cut glass and strides toward his private elevator. The merger papers inside that case represent everything he's worked for, everything his father's memory demands. But somewhere in the building below, children are laughing in a playroom his anonymous donations helped create, and that sound has become more important to him than all the applause in all the boardrooms in the world. The elevator doors slide open like a steel mouth ready to swallow his anxiety whole. Miles steps inside without looking, his mind racing through contingency plans and backup strategies. His finger hovers over the button for the parking garage when he realizes something's wrong. The elevator is supposed to be empty. His private elevator is always empty. Instead, he finds himself looking at a young woman in scrubs the color of ocean waves, her dark hair pulled back in a ponytail that reveals the graceful curve of her neck. She's holding a tablet against her chest like armor, but it's her eyes that stop his carefully prepared apology in his throat. Brown eyes warm enough to melt the permafrost around his heart, currently focused with laser intensity on a crying infant cradled in the arms of a teenage mother who looks barely old enough to drive, let alone navigate the terrifying world of parenthood. "It's okay, sweetheart," the woman in scrubs says, her voice carrying the kind of quiet strength that could calm hurricanes. "Babies sometimes get fussy in elevators. The change in pressure can bother their little ears." She moves with the fluid grace of someone who has spent years learning to be exactly where people need her most. Without being asked, she gently places one finger against the baby's tiny palm, and something magical happens. The crying stops. Just like that. As if her touch carries some secret frequency that speaks directly to innocent hearts. Miles finds himself holding his breath, watching this stranger work magic with nothing but gentleness and genuine care. When she looks up at the young mother, barely more than a child herself, her smile contains enough warmth to power the sun. "Your baby's beautiful," she says simply. "How old?" 6 weeks, the teenage mother whispers, exhaustion and worry written in the dark circles under her eyes. "She's been crying all morning. I was so scared something was wrong." "Hey." The woman in scrubs reaches out and squeezes the girl's hand with easy compassion. "You're doing everything right. Sometimes babies just need to tell us about their day, and crying is their only language. You brought her here because you love her. That makes you a good mother." Miles watches the transformation happen in real time. The teenage mother's shoulders relax. Her breathing deepens. The terror in her eyes softens into something that might actually be confidence. All because a stranger chose kindness over efficiency, connection over convenience. The elevator lurches. Not the smooth, predictable motion of German engineering, but a violent shudder that sends Miles's briefcase sliding across the floor and makes the lights flicker like dying stars. Emergency lighting kicks in, casting everything in an amber glow that makes the small space feel both intimate and surreal. "Oh no," the teenage mother gasps, instinctively pulling her baby closer. "It's all right," the woman in scrubs says immediately, her voice steady as bedrock. Elevator malfunctions happen. The emergency system is already working. She gestures to the soft lighting around them. "We're perfectly safe." But Miles can see the tension in her shoulders, the way her knuckles have gone white around her tablet. She's afraid too, but she's choosing to be brave for someone who needs her to be brave. The realization hits him like a physical blow. When was the last time someone had been brave for him? When was the last time someone had seen past his armor to the human being underneath and offered comfort instead of calculation? The elevator gives another sickening lurch and comes to a complete stop. Emergency silence fills the space between them, the kind of quiet that makes every heartbeat sound like thunder. Miles's phone shows no signal. They're suspended somewhere between floors, caught in a mechanical limbo that feels strangely symbolic. "Well," the woman in scrubs says with a smile that somehow makes being trapped feel less like a crisis and more like an unexpected adventure, "I guess we're all going to get to know each other." She extends her hand toward Miles first, and he realizes with a start that she has absolutely no idea who he is. No recognition flickers in her warm brown eyes. No calculation about what knowing him might mean for her career. She's simply offering human connection to a fellow human being stuck in an elevator. "I'm Abigail Mitchell," she says. Pediatric nurse practitioner, currently on hour 14 of what was supposed to be a 12-hour shift. Her hand is smaller than his, but her grip is firm. Confident. The callus on her index finger speaks of years spent writing notes about other people's children, documenting small victories and holding space for unimaginable fears. When their skin connects, Miles feels something electric pass between them, not just attraction, though that hits him like a sledgehammer to the chest, but recognition. As if some part of him that's been asleep for years is suddenly, brilliantly awake. "Miles," he manages, his usual corporate introduction dying unspoken on his tongue. Just Miles. Not Miles Westbrook, CEO of Westbrook Industries. Not Miles Westbrook, worth 8 figures and climbing. Just Miles, a man trapped in an elevator with a woman whose touch makes him remember what it feels like to be human. And this gorgeous girl, Abigail continues, turning to the teenage mother with the same genuine warmth she'd shown him. What's your name, honey? Jessica, the girl whispers. And this is Emma. She looks down at her baby with a love so fierce it makes Miles's chest ache. She's everything to me. I don't know what I'd do if something happened to her. Nothing's going to happen to her, Abigail says with quiet certainty. And you know what? Even if something unexpected comes up, you'll handle it. Because that's what mothers do. They find strength they didn't know they had. Miles watches this exchange from what feels like another planet. In his world, people spend conversations calculating advantage, measuring what they can gain from every interaction. But Abigail gives without expecting return, offers comfort without keeping score. She's either the most sophisticated actor he's ever encountered, or she's exactly what she appears to be, genuinely, impossibly good. His phone buzzes insistently against his leg. Even with no signal, the device seems determined to remind him of the crisis waiting in the world above their suspended reality. The Oakley deal. Danny Collins's threats. The shareholders who are probably already questioning his judgment. But for the first time in longer than he can remember, the urgency feels distant. Secondary. Because right now, in this moment, he's watching a woman make a frightened teenager feel safe with nothing but words and presence, and it's the most important thing happening in any universe. The baby, Emma, starts fussing again, her tiny face scrunching up in preparation for a full-scale assault on everyone's eardrums. But instead of the wailing Miles expects, the sound that emerges is more like a question. A tentative inquiry into this strange new world of emergency lighting and unexpected strangers. She's curious, Abigail observes with delight. Look at her eyes. She's trying to figure out where she is. And she's right. The baby's dark eyes are wide and alert, moving from face to face with the serious consideration of a tiny philosopher contemplating the mysteries of existence. When her gaze lands on Miles, she studies him with such grave intensity that he finds himself sitting up straighter, as if being evaluated by the most important critic in the world. I think she likes you, Jessica says, and there's surprise in her voice. She usually cries when strangers look at her. Miles has negotiated billion-dollar deals with less nervousness than he feels under this infant's scrutiny. I don't really know anything about babies, he admits. Nobody does, at first, Abigail says gently. But babies are excellent teachers. They tell you exactly what they need, if you pay attention. As if to prove her point, Emma makes a soft cooing sound and reaches one tiny fist toward Miles. Without thinking, he extends his finger, and she grabs it with the startling strength that all newborns seem to possess. Her skin is impossibly soft, like touching a cloud that decided to take human form. Something profound shifts in Miles's chest. This tiny human being, barely 6 weeks old, has just chosen to trust him. Not his money, not his reputation, not his carefully cultivated image of success. Just him. The man underneath all the armor. She has good instincts, Abigail says quietly, and when Miles looks up, he finds her watching him with an expression he can't quite read. Children usually do. If you haven't already, hit that subscribe button and join our Dear Love Diaries family. Your special place in this community of heartfelt stories is waiting for you. These passionate journeys of souls connecting against all odds have brought together thousands of beautiful hearts just like yours. Make sure you hit the bell too, so you'll know immediately when a new story unfolds in our diary of love. The emergency lighting flickers, reminding them all that they're still suspended between floors, caught in a moment that exists outside normal time. But somehow, Miles doesn't mind anymore. In fact, he's beginning to suspect that this mechanical failure might be the best thing that's happened to him in years. Because sitting here in this small space, watching Abigail Mitchell turn a crisis into a moment of connection, he's starting to remember something he'd forgotten in all his years of chasing his father's approval, that the most valuable things in life can't be acquired or leveraged or strategically maneuvered into existence. Sometimes, they just step into the wrong elevator and change everything. The baby's grip on his finger tightens, as if she's trying to hold him in this moment forever. And for the first time in his adult life, Miles Westbrook finds himself hoping that rescue takes its sweet time. Miles had attended Harvard Business School, where they taught courses on crisis management and strategic thinking under pressure. He'd negotiated hostile takeovers in rooms full of sharks who could smell weakness from 3 time zones away. He'd faced down board members who wanted his head on a platter and emerged victorious with nothing but preparation and cold logic. But nothing in his extensive education had prepared him for the challenge of making small talk with a woman whose smile made him forget his own name. So, he says, searching for safe conversational territory, 14 hours is a long shift. Abigail adjusts her position on the elevator floor, somehow managing to look graceful even while sitting cross-legged in scrubs. Double shift, she explains. One of our nurses called in sick, and the pediatric unit can't run short-staffed. Not when you've got premature babies who need monitoring every 15 minutes. There's no complaint in her voice, no resentment about the extra hours or missed sleep. Just quiet acceptance of responsibility, as if staying late to care for other people's children is as natural as breathing. Miles finds himself studying her profile as she speaks, noting the way exhaustion has drawn faint lines around her eyes but hasn't dimmed the warmth in them. "Doesn't your family mind?" he asks. "The long hours, I mean." Something flickers across her face, so quickly he almost misses it. "My sister Lillian worries sometimes. Says I work too much, don't take enough time for myself." She shrugs, the movement causing her ponytail to brush against the collar of her scrubs. "But this isn't just a job for me. These children, they need someone who sees them as more than just symptoms to treat or problems to solve." The way she says it makes Miles wonder who in her life made her feel like a problem to solve. The thought sends an unexpected surge of protectiveness through his chest, which is ridiculous because he's known this woman for exactly 23 minutes and has no right to feel protective of anything about her. "What about you?" Abigail asks, turning those perceptive brown eyes on him with gentle curiosity. "What do you do that keeps you in such expensive suits?" Miles glances down at his Armani jacket, suddenly self-conscious about the cost of his clothing in a way he's never been before. In his world, expensive suits are armor, symbols of success that communicate power before he even opens his mouth. But here, trapped in an elevator with a woman who measures worth by kindness instead of net worth, the price tag feels almost embarrassing. "Business," he says carefully. "I run a company." "What kind of company?" The question should be simple. He's answered it thousands of times at networking events and board meetings and charity galas where people ask not because they care but because they're calculating what his attention might be worth to them. But something about the way Abigail asks, with genuine interest instead of strategic curiosity, makes him want to give her a real answer instead of his usual corporate speak. "We started in tech," he says slowly. "Software solutions for healthcare systems. But lately, we've been expanding into other areas." He doesn't mention the anonymous donations to children's hospitals. Doesn't explain that other areas includes funding research for rare pediatric diseases and providing scholarships for nurses who want to specialize in childhood cancer care. Because those aren't business decisions in the traditional sense, they're attempts to use his success for something that matters, something his father would probably call soft and unprofitable. "That's wonderful," Abigail says, and her smile suggests she somehow understands the parts he didn't say. "Healthcare technology is so important. The digital systems we use here have revolutionized patient care, especially for children with complex conditions." She talks about medical technology with the same passion other people reserve for discussing their favorite movies, explaining how electronic health records help coordinate care between specialists and how telemedicine has made expert consultations available to children in rural areas who might otherwise go without proper treatment. Miles finds himself hanging on every word, not because he doesn't understand healthcare technology. Westbrook Industries has developed several of the systems she's describing, but because watching her light up when she talks about helping children is like watching the sun rise. She gestures with her hands as she speaks, her whole body animated by enthusiasm for work that clearly means everything to her. "I'm sorry," she says suddenly, her cheeks flushing with embarrassment. "I'm talking too much. Lillian always says I get carried away when I start talking about work." "Don't apologize," Miles says quickly. "It's refreshing to hear someone talk about their job like it actually matters to them. Doesn't yours matter to you?" The question catches him off guard with its directness. In his world, people assume that success equals fulfillment, that the size of one's bank account directly correlates to one's sense of purpose. No one has ever asked him point-blank whether his work actually matters to him. "It used to," he says honestly. "Or I thought it did. Lately, I've been wondering if I was just trying to prove something to someone who isn't around to see it anymore." The admission surprises him. He's never voiced that thought out loud, never acknowledged even to himself that his relentless pursuit of business success might be more about his father's ghost than his own dreams. Abigail tilts her head, studying him with the same focused attention she'd given baby Emma earlier. "Your father? He died when I was 22, Miles says. Right after I dropped out of my MBA program to start the company. He thought I was making a mistake, throwing away guaranteed success for a pipe dream. I've spent the last 12 years trying to prove him wrong." "And have you? Proved him wrong?" Miles considers the question. By every conventional measure, he's succeeded beyond his wildest dreams. Westbrook Industries is worth more than his father's entire investment portfolio ever was. He's achieved the kind of success that gets written up in business magazines and studied in case studies. But sitting here in this elevator, watching Abigail's face soften with understanding, he realizes that external validation has never quite filled the hollow space his father's disappointment carved out in his chest. "I don't know," he admits. "Sometimes I think success is just a really expensive way of avoiding the question of whether you're actually happy." The words hang in the air between them, more honest than anything he's said in years. Abigail doesn't rush to fill the silence with platitudes or advice, doesn't try to fix or analyze or optimize his feelings. She just lets his truth exist in the space between them, accepted and witnessed. Baby Emma chooses that moment to make a soft gurgling sound, as if offering commentary on the philosophical complexity of adult emotions. The sound breaks the intensity of the moment, and both Miles and Abigail laugh. "She's very wise for 6 weeks old," Abigail observes. "Most babies are," Jessica says quietly. It's the first time she's spoken in several minutes, and both adults turn their attention to her. "My mom used to say that babies are born knowing everything important, and we spend our whole lives trying to remember what we forgot." "Your mom sounds like a smart woman," Abigail says gently. Jessica's expression clouds over. "She was. She died when Emma was 3 weeks old. Car accident." Her voice catches slightly. "She never got to meet her granddaughter properly. Just saw her once in the NICU before." The sentence trails off, but the grief in it fills the elevator like smoke. Miles feels his chest tighten with sympathetic pain, recognizing the specific ache of losing a parent too soon, of having conversations cut short by death before all the important things could be said. Abigail moves without hesitation, shifting closer to Jessica and placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. "I'm so sorry for your loss. Your mother would be so proud of you, you know. Taking care of Emma all by yourself, making sure she gets the medical attention she needs. That takes incredible strength." "I don't feel strong," Jessica whispers. "Most days I feel like I'm drowning, like I'm just pretending to know what I'm doing and hoping no one notices." "That feeling?" Abigail says with a small smile. "That's not weakness. That's motherhood. Every mother I've ever met feels that way sometimes. The difference is, you're not pretending. You're learning. And Emma is lucky to have someone who loves her enough to worry about doing it right. Miles watches this exchange with something that feels like awe. In his business world, vulnerability is weakness, uncertainty is failure, and admitting you don't know something is professional suicide. But Abigail treats Jessica's fears with the reverence usually reserved for sacred things, honoring her struggle instead of trying to minimize it. What about Emma's father? Abigail asks gently. Is he able to help? Jessica's laugh contains no humor at all. He decided that being a teenage dad wasn't part of his life plan. Blocked my number the day I told him I was keeping the baby. She looks down at Emma with fierce protectiveness. His loss. She's the most amazing thing that's ever happened to me. The love in her voice when she talks about her daughter is so pure it makes Miles's throat tight. This 17-year-old girl, barely out of childhood herself, has more emotional maturity than most of the adults in his professional circle. She's choosing love over convenience, responsibility over comfort, and doing it with a grace that puts his own complaints about stress and pressure into sharp perspective. You know what I think? Abigail says, her voice warm with conviction. I think your daughter is going to grow up knowing exactly what real love looks like, because she's learning it from you every single day. And someday, when she's older, she's going to understand how lucky she was to have a mother brave enough to choose her, even when it was hard. Jessica's eyes fill with tears, but they're the good kind. Tears that wash away doubt instead of drowning hope. Thank you, she whispers. I really needed to hear that today. I'm loving the connection in these comments. Tell me about a time when an unexpected moment changed your perspective on someone. Share your stories below. This community is built on real connections just like the one we're witnessing. The elevator gives a small shudder, as if the building itself is sighing, and the emergency lighting flickers momentarily before steadying again. Through the small gap at the top of the doors, they can hear the distant sound of voices, rescue workers, probably, assessing the situation and planning their extraction. But Miles discovers he's in no hurry to be rescued. This suspended moment between floors has become something precious, a pocket of honesty and human connection that exists outside the complicated demands of the real world. Here, he's not a billionaire CEO with shareholders to appease and rivals to defeat. He's just a man, sitting on an elevator floor, learning things about courage and kindness from a teenage mother and a woman in scrubs who treat strangers like family. The realization hits him with startling clarity. This is the first time in years that he's felt completely present in his own life. Not thinking about the next meeting or the next deal or the next crisis that needs managing. Just here, in this moment, with these people who have somehow made an elevator malfunction feel like a gift. Can I ask you something? He says to Abigail, the question emerging before his usual internal filter can stop it. Of course. Why nursing? I mean, specifically pediatric nursing. It can't be easy, dealing with sick children every day. Abigail is quiet for a moment, her fingers absently smoothing the fabric of her scrubs. When she speaks, her voice carries the weight of old pain transformed into purpose. When I was 8, my little brother Marcus got leukemia, she says simply. Spent 2 years in and out of hospitals, treatments, surgeries, the whole nightmare. And through all of it, there was this one nurse, her name was Patricia, who made everything bearable. Not just for Marcus, but for our whole family. She pauses, lost in memory, her expression soft with old affection. Patricia never talked down to Marcus, never treated him like he was just a sick kid. She saw him, really saw him, as this brilliant, funny little person who happened to be fighting cancer. And when he was scared, which was a lot, she had this way of making him feel brave. Like he could handle anything as long as she was there. Did he? Miles starts to ask, then stops, afraid of the answer. He made it, Abigail says with a smile that lights up her entire face. Full recovery. He's 26 now, married, 2 kids of his own. But those years, they changed all of us. I realized that healing isn't just about medicine and procedures. It's about making people feel seen and valued and loved, even when they're at their most vulnerable. So you became Patricia, Miles says, understanding flooding through him. I tried to become Patricia, Abigail corrects gently. Some days I get close. Other days I fall short. But every child who walks through those doors deserves someone in their corner who believes in their strength, even when they can't believe in it themselves. The simple humanity of it takes Miles's breath away. While he's been building empires and chasing profit margins, Abigail has been building something infinitely more valuable, a career based on love made practical, compassion made professional. Emma makes another soft cooing sound, and Abigail's attention returns to the baby with automatic tenderness. She's getting sleepy, she observes. All this excitement has worn her out. She likes you, Jessica says. She's usually fussy with new people, but she's been calm this whole time. You have a gift. Children know, Abigail says simply. They can sense when someone genuinely cares about them. Emma feels safe because she is safe. Sometimes that's all any of us really need, to know that we're safe and cared for. Miles finds himself thinking about safety in ways he never has before. Physical safety, emotional safety, the safety of being truly known and accepted without judgment. When was the last time he'd felt that kind of safety? When was the last time he'd offered it to someone else? The sound of machinery echoes through the elevator shaft above them, rescue equipment being positioned, safety protocols being implemented. Their suspended moment is coming to an end, and Miles realizes with something approaching panic that he's not ready for it to be over. Because once those doors open, he'll go back to being Miles Westbrook, CEO, with board meetings and hostile takeovers and Danny Collins's threats waiting to devour his attention. And Abigail will go back to being a pediatric nurse with double shifts and sick children who need her expertise more than some random billionaire who happened to get trapped in her elevator. But right now, for just a little longer, they're simply two human beings who found each other in an unexpected place, and that feels like the most important thing in any universe. Chapter 2. The rescue comes exactly 47 minutes after the elevator stopped moving. Miles knows because he's been checking his watch obsessively, trying to memorize every second of this strange interlude that feels more real than anything that's happened to him in months. Voices echo from above as the maintenance crew works to manually open the doors. The sound of metal against metal fills the elevator shaft, followed by the reassuring tones of the fire department captain explaining the extraction process. "All right, folks," comes a voice from above. "We're going to get you out of there. Just need you to stay calm and follow instructions." Miles watches Abigail help Jessica gather her things, the diaper bag, the baby blanket, the small stuffed animal that Emma has been clutching throughout their adventure. Her movements are efficient but gentle, making sure both mother and baby feel secure as their rescue unfolds. "Here," Miles says, standing and extending his hand to help Jessica to her feet. "Let me carry something for you." Jessica looks surprised by the offer, as if wealthy men in expensive suits don't usually volunteer to carry diaper bags. But she hands him the bag gratefully, and Miles is struck by how heavy it is, packed with all the supplies a young mother needs to care for her baby, evidence of love made practical and portable. The elevator doors part with mechanical reluctance, revealing the concerned faces of the rescue team and curious hospital staff who've gathered to witness their emergence. Emergency lighting gives way to the harsh fluorescence of the hospital corridor, and suddenly their intimate moment is flooded with the busy urgency of the real world. "Everyone okay?" asks the fire captain, a weathered man whose eyes automatically assess each of them for signs of distress or injury. "We're fine," Abigail assures him, helping Jessica step carefully over the gap between elevator floor and hallway. "No injuries, no medical emergencies. Just a little adventure." But as they step back into normal time and space, Miles feels something precious slipping away. The elevator had been a world unto itself, a place where normal rules didn't apply and genuine connection was possible. Out here, surrounded by people who know exactly who he is, the magic feels fragile, vulnerable to the harsh light of reality. Mr. Westbrook. A voice cuts through the crowd, sharp with barely concealed panic. Sir, I've been looking everywhere for you. Miles turns to see his assistant, David, pushing through the cluster of hospital staff with the desperate energy of someone whose job depends on keeping his boss on schedule. David's usually pristine appearance is disheveled, his hair mussed from running through the building, his typically unflappable demeanor cracked with stress. The Oakley meeting, David pants, checking his tablet frantically. They've been waiting in the conference room for 20 minutes. Mr. Collins called 3 times, and the legal team is asking about the acquisition timeline, and... David. Miles's voice carries enough authority to stop the panicked recitation mid-sentence. Breathe. But even as he calms his assistant, Miles can feel the weight of his responsibilities settling back onto his shoulders like a lead blanket. The Oakley deal. Danny Collins's threats. The shareholders who are counting on this acquisition to prove that Westbrook Industries hasn't lost its competitive edge. He glances toward Abigail, who's busy making sure Jessica and Emma are okay, checking the baby's breathing and asking gentle questions about their plans for the rest of the day. She hasn't looked in his direction since they left the elevator, and he realizes with a sinking feeling that she probably doesn't want to be associated with the chaos surrounding his rescue. Sir? David prompts, his voice tight with urgency. The meeting? Yes, Miles says, dragging his attention back to the crisis at hand. Yes, of course. Tell them I'll be there in 5 minutes. But instead of heading toward the conference room, he finds himself walking toward Abigail, drawn by some force stronger than corporate obligations. She's kneeling beside Jessica, writing something on a piece of paper torn from her tablet. This is my personal number, she's saying to the teenage mother. If Emma gets fussy tonight and you can't figure out why, or if you just need someone to tell you that you're doing a good job, call me. Okay? Day or night? Jessica's eyes fill with tears. I can't afford to pay you for consultations. Who said anything about payment? Abigail smiles. This is what friends do for each other. And we're friends now, right? The simple generosity of it, offering support without thought of compensation, creating connection where none existed before, makes Miles's chest tight with admiration and something that might be falling in love. Abigail, he says, her name feeling strange and wonderful on his tongue. She looks up, and for a moment their eyes meet with the same intensity they'd shared in the elevator. But then she notices David hovering behind Miles, notices the way hospital staff are watching their interaction with curious interest, and something shudders in her expression. I should let you get to your meeting, she says, standing and smoothing her scrubs with brisk efficiency. Important business, I'm sure. There's nothing accusatory in her tone, but Miles hears the distance anyway. The reminder that they come from different worlds, have different responsibilities, different lives waiting for them beyond this moment. Wait, he says, then pauses, uncertain what he wants to say. That he doesn't want this to end? That meeting her has changed something fundamental in how he sees the world? That he'd rather spend another hour trapped in that elevator with her than face a dozen board meetings? Yes? He glances around at the watching faces, at David's barely concealed impatience, at the weight of expectations pressing down on him from all sides. Thank you. For making a bad situation better. It's inadequate, safe, the kind of polite thanks he'd give to any service professional who'd done their job well. But it's all he can manage with an audience, all his carefully controlled public persona will allow. You're welcome, Abigail says simply. Take care of yourself, Miles. And then she's walking away, her sneakers silent on the polished floor, her ponytail swaying with each step. Miles watches her go until she disappears around a corner, taking something vital with her. Sir? David's voice is gentler now, recognizing the strange expression on his boss's face. The meeting? Miles forces himself to focus, to push down the unexpected longing that settled in his chest like a physical ache. Right. The meeting. Let's go. But as they walk through the hospital corridors toward the administrative wing where Westbrook Industries maintains a small satellite office, Miles finds his attention caught by details he's never noticed before. Children's artwork decorating the walls, bright and hopeful despite being created in a place where hope is often in short supply. Nurses moving with the same purposeful grace he'd witnessed in Abigail, their scrubs a rainbow of healing colors. The sound of laughter drifting from a playroom where children are being children despite their circumstances. This building isn't just a medical facility, he realizes. It's a place where miracles happen daily, where people like Abigail choose to spend their lives fighting for other people's children. And somewhere in this maze of healing, his anonymous donations have helped create spaces where those miracles are possible. The thought should fill him with satisfaction, with the warm glow of philanthropy well executed. Instead, it makes him feel like a fraud. Writing checks is easy when you have more money than you could spend in 3 lifetimes. But what Abigail does, showing up, day after day, being present for pain and hope and fear in equal measure, that takes a kind of courage he's never had to develop. Mr. Westbrook. The voice belongs to Dr. Patricia Hamilton, the hospital's chief administrator, a woman whose silver hair and gentle smile disguise one of the sharpest medical minds in the country. She's waiting outside the conference room, her expression carrying the particular blend of gratitude and slight discomfort that Miles has come to associate with people who benefit from his anonymous giving but suspect he might want something in return. Dr. Hamilton, Miles says, accepting her offered handshake. I apologize for the delay. Unexpected elevator malfunction. So I heard. I trust you weren't injured? No, just delayed. He pauses, then adds impulsively, I was stuck with one of your nurses. Abigail Mitchell. She was remarkable. Something warm flickers in Dr. Hamilton's eyes. Abigail is one of our best. The children adore her, and she has an uncanny ability to calm anxious parents. We're lucky to have her. Yes, Miles says quietly. You are. Dr. Hamilton studies him for a moment, as if hearing something unexpected in his tone. But before she can comment, David clears his throat meaningfully, and the moment passes. Shall we? Dr. Hamilton gestures toward the conference room where the Oakley Industries executives are waiting with barely concealed impatience. The next 2 hours pass in a blur of financial projections and legal terminology, but Miles finds his concentration scattered in ways that have nothing to do with Danny Collins's threats or acquisition timelines. Instead, he keeps thinking about the way Abigail's hands moved when she comforted baby Emma, gentle but confident. The way she'd made Jessica feel capable instead of overwhelmed. The way she'd looked at him not as a billionaire or a CEO or a potential opportunity, but simply as a human being worth knowing. Mr. Westbrook? The voice belongs to Sandra Oakley, the steel-haired matriarch whose family has built Oakley Industries into a healthcare empire spanning 3 continents. You seem distracted. Are we keeping you from something more important? There's an edge to her voice that suggests she's not entirely joking. In her world, his world, there's nothing more important than the business at hand, no excuse for divided attention when millions of dollars are being discussed. My apologies, Miles says, forcing himself back to the present. Please continue. But Sandra's eyes remain fixed on him with calculating interest. Actually, before we proceed, I have a question. My board has been reviewing your company's recent, philanthropic activities. Some of my investors are concerned that Westbrook Industries has become more focused on charity than profitability. Miles feels his spine straighten, recognizing the challenge hidden in polite corporate speak. This is Danny Collins's influence at work, spreading doubt about his fitness to lead, his ability to make hard decisions when necessary. Our charitable initiatives represent less than 3% of our annual profits, Miles says evenly. Hardly enough to impact our core business operations. 3% of $8 billion is still a significant sum, Sandra counters. And it raises questions about your priorities. Are you running a business or a humanitarian organization? The question hangs in the air like smoke, and Miles realizes this is the moment Danny Collins has been maneuvering toward. The moment when he'll be forced to choose between the values that have begun to matter to him and the ruthless pragmatism that built his empire. 6 months ago, the answer would have been automatic. Business first, always. Profit margins over principles, shareholder value over social responsibility. That was the code his father had lived by, the legacy Adrian Westbrook had expected his son to uphold. But 6 months ago, he hadn't spent 47 minutes in an elevator with a woman who'd chosen nursing over law because she wanted to heal children instead of maximize billable hours. 6 months ago, he hadn't watched a teenage mother love her baby with such fierce devotion that it made his own pursuit of success feel hollow and selfish. 6 months ago, he hadn't met Abigail Mitchell. "Mrs. Oakley," he says slowly, "may I ask you something?" Sandra's eyebrows rise slightly at the unexpected question, but she nods. "Why did your family get into healthcare?" "I beg your pardon?" "Your grandfather started Oakley Industries in 1952 with a single medical supply company. What motivated him to choose healthcare over, say, manufacturing or retail?" Sandra's expression softened slightly, clearly not expecting the conversation to take this turn. "My grandfather lost his first child to pneumonia because the rural hospital where they lived didn't have access to proper medical equipment. He started the company to make sure other families wouldn't face the same loss. So Oakley Industries was built on the principle that business could serve something larger than profit," Miles says. "That commerce could be a tool for preventing suffering." "That was a long time ago," Sandra says carefully. "The healthcare industry has changed significantly since then." Has it? Or have we just convinced ourselves that caring about outcomes other than quarterly earnings makes us weak? Miles can feel David's alarmed gaze burning into the side of his face, can practically hear his assistant's internal panic about where this conversation is heading. But for the first time in years, Miles feels completely clear about what he wants to say. "Mrs. Oakley, 3% of our profits goes to initiatives that directly improve patient outcomes. Pediatric cancer research. Medical technology for underserved communities. Training programs for healthcare workers in developing countries. That money doesn't disappear into administrative overhead or feel-good publicity campaigns. It saves lives." He pauses, thinking about Emma's tiny fingers wrapped around his, about Jessica's determined love for her daughter, about Abigail's choice to become Patricia for a new generation of frightened children. "And if that makes me weak in the eyes of some investors, then I suppose I'm weak. But I'd rather be weak and build something that matters than be strong and build something that's ultimately meaningless." The silence that follows is so complete that Miles can hear the hum of the conference room's ventilation system, the distant sound of hospital life continuing beyond their closed door. Sandra Oakley studies him with the intensity of a scientist examining an unexpected specimen. "That's quite a speech, Mr. Westbrook," she says finally. "Very passionate. Very human." Miles can't tell if she means it as a compliment or a critique, but he finds he doesn't care. For the first time in longer than he can remember, he said exactly what he means instead of what he thinks people want to hear. "It's also exactly what my grandfather would have said," Sandra continues, and now there's something that might be approval in her voice. "He always believed that the best business decisions were the ones that honored both profit and purpose." She leans back in her chair, her calculating expression replaced by something warmer. "Mr. Westbrook, I've been in business for 43 years. I've seen countless executives who could recite financial projections like poetry but couldn't tell you why their work mattered beyond making rich people richer. You've just reminded me why Oakley Industries exists in the first place." Miles feels something tight in his chest begin to loosen. "Does that mean?" "It means the deal proceeds as planned," Sandra says with a smile that transforms her entire face. "But I have one condition." "Name it." "I want to visit some of these charitable initiatives you're so passionate about. If we're going to be partners, I want to understand what we're really building together." Relief floods through Miles so powerfully it makes him dizzy. The deal is safe. Westbrook Industries will survive Danny Collins's machinations. His father's legacy is secure. But as handshakes are exchanged and contracts are initialed, Miles finds himself thinking not about shareholder reactions or market projections, but about a woman in ocean blue scrubs who'd made a frightened baby stop crying with nothing but gentleness and presence. The meeting concludes with promises of due diligence and implementation timelines, the usual corporate ballet of dotted I's and crossed T's. But when Sandra Oakley pulls him aside as the room empties, her expression is thoughtful. "That speech about purpose over profit," she says quietly. "That wasn't prepared, was it? That came from somewhere personal." Miles considers deflecting, returning to the safe territory of professional distance. But something about Sandra's manner invites honesty. "I met someone today," he admits. "Someone who reminded me why success is supposed to matter." Sandra's smile is knowing. "Ah. Someone who impressed you with their character rather than their connections." "Something like that." "Then I suggest you don't let business keep you from exploring that connection, Mr. Westbrook. In my experience, the people who change our perspective on what matters are rare and precious gifts. Don't let one slip away because you're too busy managing spreadsheets." The advice follows Miles out of the conference room and down the hospital corridors, past the children's artwork and the rainbow scrubs and the sound of healing happening in 1,000 small ways. He finds himself walking slower than usual, his eyes searching each face he passes for one particular smile, one specific pair of warm brown eyes. But Abigail is nowhere to be seen, probably deep into her endless double shift, caring for children who need her expertise more than some random billionaire needs her attention. The rational part of his brain knows he should leave her alone, return to his office and his regular life and the comfortable distance that wealth provides from messy human complications. The rational part of his brain has never been weaker. "David," he says as they wait for the elevator, the regular elevator this time, the one that goes directly to the parking garage without mechanical failures or life-changing encounters. "Yes, sir." "Clear my schedule for tomorrow morning." David's fingers freeze over his tablet. "Sir." "You have the Morrison Industries breakfast, followed by the quarterly review with the board, and then the conference call with the Tokyo office." "Reschedule them." "All of them?" "All of them." The elevator doors open, different doors, leading to a different elevator, one that will carry him back to his ordinary life without magic or revelation. But as he steps inside, Miles realizes he's not the same man who got into the wrong elevator this morning. That man was focused on proving himself worthy of a dead father's approval. This man is beginning to wonder if there might be something better worth proving. The elevator descends smoothly toward the parking garage, carrying him away from the hospital and back toward his world of board meetings and profit margins and carefully calculated decisions. But it also carries him toward tomorrow morning, when he'll have no meetings to attend and no schedules to keep and all the time in the world to figure out how to accidentally run into a woman in ocean blue scrubs who's already changed his life in ways he's only beginning to understand. 24 hours later, Miles Westbrook stands in the lobby of the same medical center, feeling more nervous than he has since his first board presentation 12 years ago. He's traded his usual Armani armor for dark jeans and a simple button-down shirt, an outfit that cost more than most people's monthly rent but looks casual enough to suggest he just happened to be in the neighborhood. Which is ridiculous, because nobody just happens to be in the neighborhood of a children's hospital at 7:30 in the morning unless they have a very specific reason for being there. Miles's reason is currently somewhere in the building above him, probably starting another impossibly long shift, probably not thinking about him at all. The thought should be deflating, but instead it's oddly liberating. For once in his adult life, he's pursuing something, someone, who has absolutely no idea what he's worth in financial terms. Abigail's opinion of him will be based entirely on who he is as a person, not what he owns or controls or can provide. It's terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. "Excuse me," he says to the volunteer at the information desk, an elderly woman whose nameplate identifies her as Dorothy and whose bright smile suggests she genuinely enjoys helping people. I'm looking for the pediatric unit. Visiting someone special? Dorothy asks with the gentle nosiness of someone who's spent years perfecting the art of caring without intruding. I'm hoping to, Miles says honestly. Dorothy's expression warms with understanding, as if she recognizes the particular brand of nervousness that comes with matters of the heart. 8th floor, dear. Follow the yellow line on the floor, take the elevator bank on your right. The yellow line leads him through corridors filled with the soft chaos of hospital life, nurses conferring in hushed tones, families clustered around waiting room chairs, the distant sound of children's voices mixing with the electronic beeps and hums of medical equipment. It's a world he's supported financially but never experienced personally, and walking through it feels like stepping into a different universe where money matters less than healing, where success is measured in small recoveries and gentle comfort rather than quarterly earnings. The pediatric unit is a revelation of color and hope. Gone are the sterile whites and institutional beiges of the adult floors, replaced by walls painted with murals of forests and oceans and fantastical creatures that seem designed to make children forget, at least temporarily, that they're in a hospital. Nurses move through the space wearing scrubs printed with cartoon characters and bright patterns, their professional competence softened by an obvious love for their young patients. And there, at the nurse's station, her hair pulled back in the same practical ponytail he remembers from yesterday, is Abigail. She's conferring with another nurse about a patient chart, her expression serious and focused. But even in professional mode, there's something about her presence that seems to make the space around her warmer, more welcoming. A small girl in a wheelchair rolls past the station, and Abigail looks up immediately, her face transforming into a smile that could power the sun. "Good morning, beautiful Maya," she says to the child. "Are you ready for your adventure today?" Abby, the little girl, Maya, practically bounces in her wheelchair with excitement. "Mama says I get to go to the playroom after my treatment. Will you come visit me?" "Wouldn't miss it," Abigail promises. "Save me a spot at the coloring table, okay?" Maya wheels away with the kind of joy that only children can muster in the face of medical procedures, leaving Abigail to return to her charts with a lingering smile. It's then that she notices Miles standing near the elevator, and her expression shifts from professional warmth to genuine surprise. "Miles?" She sets down her pen and walks toward him, her sneakers silent on the polished floor. "What are you doing here?" It's a fair question, and one he should have prepared a better answer for during the sleepless night he spent thinking about this moment. Instead, he finds himself offering the truth, unfiltered and vulnerable. "I couldn't stop thinking about yesterday," he says. "About what you said about children knowing when someone genuinely cares about them. I realized I've been writing checks for pediatric care for years, but I've never actually spent time with the children those checks are supposed to help." Abigail tilts her head, studying him with the same focused attention that had made him feel so seen in the elevator. "And you want to spend time with them now?" "I want to understand what I've been supporting," Miles says. "I want to see what you see when you come to work every day." There's a moment of silence between them, filled with the ambient sounds of the pediatric unit, soft conversations, gentle laughter, the quiet efficiency of healing in progress. Abigail seems to be weighing his request, measuring his sincerity against some internal standard that he desperately hopes he can meet. "It's not a photo opportunity," she says finally. "These children aren't props for corporate social responsibility campaigns. They're real people with real fears and real hopes, and they deserve to be treated with dignity and respect." "I understand. Do you?" Her brown eyes search his face with uncomfortable intensity. "Because once you see what chronic illness does to a 6-year-old, once you watch a teenager fight cancer with more courage than most adults show in their entire lives, you can't unsee it. It changes you. And if you're not ready for that change, then maybe you should stick to writing checks." The challenge in her voice is clear, and Miles realizes this is his moment of truth. He can retreat to the safety of financial philanthropy, continue supporting children's healthcare from the comfortable distance that wealth provides. Or he can step into Abigail's world and risk being transformed by the humanity he finds there. "I'm ready," he says simply. Abigail studies him for another long moment, then nods. "Okay. But we do this my way. No special treatment, no publicity, no exceptions to unit policies. You're here as a volunteer, nothing more." "Agreed. And if any child seems uncomfortable with your presence, we leave immediately. Their comfort and safety come first, always." "Of course." "All right then." Abigail's professional mask softens into something that might be approval. "Let's get you checked in with volunteer services and see if you can handle story time in the playroom." As she leads him toward the administrative office where volunteers are processed and cleared, Miles feels something he hasn't experienced in years, the nervousness of being evaluated for something that truly matters to him. Not his net worth or his business acumen or his ability to navigate corporate politics, but his capacity for simple human kindness. It's both humbling and oddly exciting to discover that he cares this much about passing a test he never knew existed. Have you ever found yourself in a situation where someone challenged you to see the world differently? Tell me about a time when stepping outside your comfort zone led to unexpected growth. Share your stories below. I love hearing how courage creates transformation. The volunteer coordinator, a middle-aged man named Robert whose gentle demeanor disguises a thorough vetting process, walks Miles through the requirements for spending time with pediatric patients. Background checks, health clearances, child protection training, all standard procedures that Miles submits to with the patience of someone who finally understands that some things are more important than convenience. "Most of our regular volunteers start in the playroom," Robert explains as he processes Miles's paperwork. "It's a good way to get comfortable with the children and understand the rhythms of the unit. Abigail specifically requested that you be placed there." Miles glances toward where Abigail is waiting in the hallway, pretending to review patient charts while obviously keeping an eye on his orientation process. The fact that she's taking personal responsibility for his introduction to the unit feels significant, like a vote of confidence he hasn't yet earned but desperately wants to deserve. "The children range in age from toddlers to teenagers," Robert continues. "Some are here for short-term treatment, others are dealing with chronic conditions that require long-term care. What they all have in common is a need for normalcy, for adults who see them as children first and patients second." "I understand," Miles says, and realizes he's beginning to. "Abigail also mentioned that you have some experience with healthcare technology," Robert adds, consulting his notes. "If you're interested in a longer-term volunteer commitment, we're always looking for people who can help with our computer literacy programs for older patients." The casual mention of long-term commitment sends an unexpected thrill through Miles's chest. The idea of having a reason to return here regularly, to build relationships with these children and their families, to be part of something meaningful beyond quarterly earnings, it's more appealing than he ever would have imagined. "I'd like that," he says. "Very much." Robert stamps the final form with the satisfied efficiency of someone who's matched yet another volunteer with the right opportunity. "Welcome to the team, Miles. Abigail will show you around and get you started." And suddenly he's being led through the pediatric unit by a woman whose presence makes him want to be better than he's ever been, toward a room full of children who will judge him not by his bank balance but by his willingness to sit on the floor and color pictures of dragons and spaceships and whatever else captures their imagination. It should be terrifying. Instead, it feels like coming home to a place he never knew he'd been looking for. Chapter 3. The playroom is a wonderland of controlled chaos, where the serious business of childhood unfolds against a backdrop of medical necessity. Bright murals cover every wall, underwater scenes complete with friendly dolphins and treasure chests, enchanted forests where cartoon animals wear tiny stethoscopes, space adventures featuring rockets powered by hope rather than fuel. Child-sized tables and chairs create intimate spaces for art projects and quiet conversations, while a reading corner stacked with pillows and blankets offers refuge for anyone needing a moment of peace. But it's the children themselves who transform the space from merely colorful to genuinely magical. A boy of about 8, his head covered by a knitted cap decorated with superhero symbols, carefully constructs a castle from building blocks with the focused determination of an architect designing something meant to last forever. 2 girls share a coloring book, their conversation a mixture of favorite princesses and upcoming procedures, spoken with the matter-of-fact acceptance that children bring to even extraordinary circumstances. "This is where we come when the medical stuff gets overwhelming," Abigail explains softly, her voice pitched low enough not to disturb the activities in progress. "Sometimes the best medicine is just being allowed to be a kid for a while." Miles watches a teenager, probably 15 or 16, help a much younger boy with a puzzle, her movements gentle despite the 4-pole she maneuvers with practiced ease. There's something profound about witnessing this kind of mutual care, children looking after each other with an instinctive understanding of shared vulnerability. "What do I do?" he asks, suddenly aware of how unprepared he is for this kind of interaction. "Just be present," Abigail says simply. "Follow their lead. Children are excellent teachers, they'll show you what they need." She introduces him to Maria, the playroom coordinator, a woman whose energy could power small cities and whose laugh seems to make even the medical equipment look cheerier. Maria assigns him to the reading corner, where a small collection of children have gathered for morning story time. "Nothing fancy," Maria assures him, handing him a well-worn picture book about a brave little mouse who befriends a dragon. "Just read with expression and be ready for interruptions. Kids love to participate." Miles settles onto one of the large floor cushions, feeling awkward and oversized in the child-centered space. His audience consists of 4 children ranging in age from about 5 to 10, each dealing with their own medical challenges but united in their curiosity about the new volunteer who looks more nervous than they do. "I'm Miles," he says by way of introduction. "I'm here to read you a story, if that sounds okay." "Are you scared of us?" asks the youngest, a little girl whose directness cut straight through any pretense. The question catches Miles off guard with its perceptiveness. "A little," he admits. "I don't spend much time with children. I'm worried I might say the wrong thing." "That's okay," says the boy in the superhero cap, whose name tag reads, Tyler. "We're used to grown-ups saying the wrong thing. Just don't tell us everything's going to be fine when you don't actually know if it is." The casual wisdom in Tyler's voice makes Miles's throat tight. "I won't," he promises. "Is there anything else I should know?" "Don't talk to us different because we're sick," adds an older girl whose arm is in a cast decorated with rainbow stickers. "We're still regular kids, just with extra doctor appointments. And if someone has to leave for medicine or treatment, don't stop the story," Tyler continues. "We can catch up later. The story keeps going even when we can't." Miles realizes he's receiving a master class in childhood resilience, taught by experts who've had to learn these lessons far too young. "Got it," he says, opening the book with hands that are only slightly trembling. "Should we see what this brave little mouse is up to?" The story unfolds with frequent interruptions. Children asking questions about dragon behavior, debating whether mice can really be friends with creatures so much larger than themselves, offering their own experiences with being small in a world designed for bigger beings. Miles finds himself drawn into their logic, their willingness to believe in friendship across impossible differences, their assumption that courage comes in all sizes. "The mouse reminds me of Connor," Tyler says during a pause in the narrative. "He's only 6, but he's the bravest person I know." "Who's Connor?" Miles asks. "He's in room 312, explains the girl with the cast. "He's having surgery tomorrow, and he's not scared at all. He says the doctors are like superheroes, just with different costumes." Miles glances toward Abigail, who's been quietly organizing art supplies nearby but obviously listening to their conversation. She catches his eye and nods toward the doorway, where a small figure in dinosaur pajamas has appeared. "Connor!" Tyler calls out. "Come meet Miles. He's reading the dragon story." Connor approaches with the cautious confidence of someone who's learned to navigate social situations while dragging an 4-pole. He's tiny for 6 years old, made smaller by the medical equipment that accompanies him, but his smile could light up the entire unit. Is it the one where the mouse teaches the dragon to be gentle? Connor asks, settling onto a cushion next to Miles with practiced ease. That's the one, Miles confirms, making room for the boy and his medical apparatus. Have you heard it before? Lots of times. It's my favorite because the dragon isn't really mean, just lonely and scared. Sometimes when people seem scary, they're actually just sad inside. The observation hits Miles with unexpected force. Connor, at 6 years old, understands something about human nature that many adults never grasp, that aggression often masks vulnerability, that the scariest monsters are usually the most frightened. As they continue reading, Miles becomes aware of Abigail moving through the playroom with quiet efficiency, checking on each child without making her monitoring obvious. She helps a teenager with her art project, adjusts a younger boy's oxygen cannula with gentle matter-of-factness, engages in whispered conversations with parents who look like they haven't slept in days. Watching her work is like witnessing poetry in motion. Every interaction is calibrated to the specific needs of each child, each family. She speaks to the teenagers with the respect due to young adults facing adult challenges, addresses the younger children with warmth that never becomes condescending, offers parents the kind of support that acknowledges their expertise in their own children while providing professional guidance when needed. Abby's the best, Connor confides to Miles during another pause in the story. She always remembers what we talked about before, and she never pretends she knows how we feel when she doesn't. She seems very special, Miles agrees, his eyes following Abigail as she kneels beside a little girl who's working on a painting with intense concentration. Are you going to marry her? Tyler asks with the casual directness that only children can manage. Miles nearly chokes on his surprise. What makes you ask that? You keep looking at her the way my dad looks at my mom when he thinks no one's watching, Tyler explains with the observational skills of someone who's spent a lot of time in waiting rooms studying adult behavior. And she keeps looking at you when she thinks you're not paying attention. Miles glances toward Abigail, just in time to catch her quickly averting her gaze from their reading circle. The brief eye contact sends an electric current through his chest, the same awareness he'd felt in the elevator amplified by the context of watching her in her element. Adults are complicated, he tells Tyler, which feels like the understatement of the century. That's what they always say, Connor observes. But usually when adults say things are complicated, they just mean they're scared to try something that might not work. The 6-year-old's wisdom renders Miles temporarily speechless. How did children become so wise about matters of the heart while adults spend years overthinking themselves out of happiness? The reading session continues for another 30 minutes, with children drifting in and out as their medical schedules dictate. Some stay for the entire story, others catch just a few minutes before being called away for treatments or procedures. But each interaction leaves Miles with a deeper understanding of the resilience that defines this place. These children are facing challenges that would break many adults, yet they approach each day with hope and curiosity and an openness to connection that puts his own emotional guardedness to shame. They've learned to find joy in small moments, to build friendships that transcend circumstance, to believe in the possibility of better days even when those days feel impossibly far away. When story time officially ends, several children linger, reluctant to return to the less colorful reality of medical routines. Connor shows Miles his collection of superhero cards, explaining the powers of each character with the expertise of someone who spent considerable time thinking about what it means to be heroic. This one's my favorite, Connor says, holding up a card featuring a hero whose power is healing others. She can't fly or move things with her mind, but she can make people feel better. That's the best superpower, I think. Miles studies the card, noting the determined expression on the character's face, the way she's depicted reaching out to help someone in need. I think you're right, he says. Healing others is definitely the best superpower. Abby has that power, Connor continues matter-of-factly. She makes everyone feel better just by being here. Maybe you could get that power too, if you practiced. The suggestion that kindness is a skill that can be developed, rather than an innate talent some people possess and others lack, strikes Miles as simultaneously obvious and revolutionary. He spent his entire adult life developing business skills, learning to negotiate and strategize and think 5 moves ahead. But when did he last consciously work on becoming more compassionate, more present, more attuned to the needs of others? Maybe I could, he agrees, meaning it more than Connor could possibly understand. As the morning progresses and children gradually disperse for various appointments and treatments, Miles finds himself helping with cleanup alongside other volunteers. It's mundane work, organizing art supplies, straightening books, wiping down tables, but there's something deeply satisfying about participating in the maintenance of this hopeful space. You did well, Abigail says, appearing beside him as he sorts colored pencils back into their designated containers. The children liked you. They're remarkable, Miles says, inadequate words for the profound experience of the last few hours. All of them. The courage they show, the way they support each other. I've never seen anything like it. They teach me something new every day, Abigail agrees, her voice soft with affection for her young patients. About resilience, about finding joy in difficult circumstances, about the importance of hope even when the odds seem impossible. There's something in her tone that suggests personal experience with impossible odds, and Miles finds himself wondering what challenges have shaped her perspective, what losses have taught her to value hope as a form of resistance against despair. Can I ask you something? He says, turning to face her fully. Of course. Yesterday, in the elevator, you said you chose nursing over law because you wanted to heal instead of, what was it? Instead of arguing for a living, Abigail finishes with a small smile. That's what my father called it when I told him I was changing majors. He wasn't wrong, exactly. Law school was about learning to win arguments, to find weaknesses in the other side's position, to compete for advantage. Nursing is about collaboration, about working together to solve problems that matter. Your family wanted you to be a lawyer? My father's a judge, my mother's a prosecutor. Legal success runs in the family. She shrugs, a gesture that tries to minimize the weight of family expectations but doesn't quite succeed. They thought I was throwing away my potential, choosing a career with less prestige and lower earning potential. Do you ever regret it? Abigail looks around the playroom, her gaze taking in the evidence of healing and hope that surrounds them. When she turns back to Miles, her brown eyes are clear with conviction. Every time I help a child through a scary procedure, every time I teach parents how to care for a complex condition, every time I get to be present for small miracles and quiet victories, how could I regret choosing this? The passion in her voice makes Miles's chest tight with admiration and something deeper, something that feels dangerously like love. He's beginning to understand that Abigail Mitchell doesn't just work in pediatric nursing. She embodies everything noble about the profession, everything healing and hopeful and fundamentally good about choosing service over self-interest. Your parents must be proud of you now, he says. Seeing what you've accomplished, how much you mean to these families. Something flickers across Abigail's face, too quick to interpret but significant enough to notice. They're working on understanding my choices, she says diplomatically. Change takes time, especially when people have strong ideas about what success should look like. Miles recognizes the careful phrasing of someone who's learned to protect family relationships while staying true to personal convictions. He knows something about disappointing parents, about choosing paths that don't align with familial expectations, about the weight of seeking approval from people who measure worth by metrics that feel increasingly meaningless. Well, he says, for what it's worth, I think you made exactly the right choice. What you do here, it matters in ways that most careers never could. Their eyes meet across the small space between them, and Miles feels that same electric awareness that had sparked in the elevator, amplified now by hours of watching her interact with the children, by understanding the depth of her compassion and the strength of her convictions. Thank you, she says softly. That that means a lot. The moment stretches between them, filled with unspoken recognition and growing attraction. Miles becomes aware of how close they're standing, close enough that he can catch the faint scent of her shampoo beneath the clinical smells of the hospital, close enough to notice the gold flecks in her brown eyes and the way her pulse beats visibly at the base of her throat. "Abigail?" A voice cuts through their suspended moment, professional and slightly urgent. They turn to see Dr. James approaching, his expression serious. "I need you to take a look at the Morrison case. The family has some questions about the treatment plan." "Of course," Abigail says immediately, her attention shifting to professional mode with practiced ease. She glances back at Miles with something that might be regret. "I should go," Miles says quickly. "The children need you." But as she walks away with Dr. James, their conversation already shifting to medical terminology and patient care protocols, Miles realizes he's not ready for their time together to end. The morning has felt like a revelation, a glimpse into a world where his wealth means nothing and his character means everything, where genuine connection is possible in ways his usual social circles never allow. He's supposed to leave now, return to his office and his meetings and the comfortable distance that money provides from messy human complications. But watching Abigail disappear around a corner, her scrubs the same ocean blue that had first caught his attention yesterday, Miles knows he's not ready to retreat to his old life. Not when he's finally found something, someone, worth staying for. The rest of the afternoon passes in a blur of corporate obligations that feel increasingly hollow after his morning in the pediatric unit. Miles sits through meetings about quarterly projections and market positioning, but his mind keeps drifting to Connor's wisdom about courage coming in all sizes, to Tyler's observation about adults making things complicated when they're really just scared, to the way Abigail's face had lit up when she talked about choosing healing over arguing. By evening, he's made a decision that would have seemed impossible 48 hours ago. "David," he says as his assistant prepares to leave for the day, "cancel my dinner with the Morrison Industries executives." David's fingers freeze over his tablet. "Sir?" "This dinner has been scheduled for 6 weeks. Morrison Industries specifically requested." "Reschedule it," Miles says firmly. "Something more important has come up." "More important than a $50 million contract negotiation?" Miles considers the question seriously. 3 days ago, nothing would have been more important than a $50 million contract negotiation. Now, he can think of at least one pediatric nurse whose opinion matters more to him than Morrison Industries' entire board of directors. "Yes," he says simply. "Much more important." David stares at him as if he's suddenly started speaking in ancient Greek, but he dutifully makes notes about rescheduling. "Will you be reachable this evening? In case of emergencies?" "Define emergency," Miles says, already reaching for his jacket. The Danny Collins situation, the Oakley implementation timeline, the Tokyo office expansion. All of which had seemed critically urgent this morning but now feel manageable, finite, solvable through ordinary business processes. None of them require his immediate personal attention in the way that one particular conversation feels like it might require his immediate personal attention. "Handle what you can," Miles tells David. "Anything that actually needs my input can wait until tomorrow." He leaves his assistant staring after him with the expression of someone whose entire worldview has just been gently but thoroughly demolished. The drive back to the hospital takes longer than it should, partly because evening traffic has transformed the city into a slow-moving river of frustrated commuters, but mostly because Miles keeps second-guessing his decision to return. What's his excuse for being there? What's his plan for approaching Abigail without seeming like he's stalking her? What if she's not even still there? But when he arrives at the pediatric unit, he finds it transformed for the evening shift. The bright activity of daytime has given way to something quieter but no less meaningful. Soft lighting creates pools of warmth throughout the corridors, and the sounds of the unit have shifted from the bustling energy of treatments and procedures to the gentler rhythms of bedtime stories and quiet conversations. He finds Abigail in the family consultation room, sitting across from a couple who look like they've aged years in the space of days. The woman is crying quietly while the man holds her hand with white-knuckled intensity, and Abigail is speaking to them in the low, careful tones reserved for delivering news that will reshape everything they thought they knew about their future. Miles doesn't intrude, but he can't help observing the way Abigail handles this most delicate of nursing responsibilities. She doesn't rush their questions or minimize their fears. She doesn't offer false reassurances or empty platitudes. Instead, she bears witness to their pain while providing the kind of clinical information that helps parents make impossible decisions about their child's care. When the couple finally leaves, leaning on each other with the fragile strength of people learning to carry unbearable weight, Abigail sits alone in the consultation room for several minutes, her head in her hands, her shoulders carrying the accumulated emotional toll of a profession that requires giving pieces of your heart to every family you serve. Miles knocks gently on the doorframe, not wanting to startle her but unable to simply walk away from her obvious exhaustion. "Miles?" She looks up with surprise that quickly shifts to something warmer. "What are you doing here?" "I brought coffee," he says, holding up the bag from the boutique cafe 3 blocks away that stays open late specifically to serve hospital staff. "And dinner, if you haven't eaten." Abigail glances at the clock on the wall and seems surprised to discover it's past 8 p.m. "I haven't, actually. Lost track of time." "Rough case?" Miles asks, settling into the chair across from her and unpacking sandwiches and coffee with the careful movements of someone who's not entirely sure his presence is welcome but hopes it might be helpful. 7-year-old with a rare genetic condition, Abigail says quietly. His parents are trying to decide between 2 treatment options, both of which involve significant risks and uncertain outcomes. She accepts the coffee he offers with hands that shake slightly from exhaustion. "Sometimes I wish medical science came with guarantees instead of just statistical probabilities." How do parents make decisions like that? They do their best with incomplete information and pray they're choosing hope over fear, Abigail says, taking a sip of coffee that seems to restore some of her energy. Most of the time, there's no clearly right answer. There's just love and courage and the determination to keep fighting for your child's future, even when that future is impossible to predict. Miles watches her face as she talks, noting the way her professional composure can't quite hide the emotional impact of her work. "How do you do it?" he asks. "Day after day, carrying all of this?" "Same way the parents do it," Abigail says with a tired smile. "Love and courage and the belief that being present for people during their worst moments is a privilege, even when it hurts." She unwraps the sandwich he's brought her, turkey and avocado from the cafe that apparently knows her usual order, and takes a bite with the grateful efficiency of someone who's skipped too many meals in service of other people's needs. "This is exactly what I needed," she says. "How did you know?" "Lucky guess," Miles says, though the truth is he'd spent 20 minutes asking the cafe staff what pediatric nurses usually ordered when they finally had time to eat. "Plus, Connor told me you sometimes forget about dinner when you're worried about your patients." "You talked to Connor again?" "Briefly, during afternoon visiting hours. He wanted to show me the get well cards his class made for him." Miles smiles at the memory. Apparently, his teacher told the other kids that Connor was in the hospital fighting dragons, and they all drew him weapons and armor to help with the battle. "That's beautiful," Abigail says, her expression softening with affection for her young patient. Children understand metaphor in ways that adults forget. To them, illness really is a dragon to be fought, and love really is armor, and hope really can be a weapon. "Connor also told me that you stayed late last night to sit with him during a procedure because his parents couldn't be there." Abigail shrugs, the gesture trying to minimize an act of kindness that clearly meant everything to a scared 6-year-old. His parents both work multiple jobs to pay for his treatment. Sometimes the medical schedule doesn't align with work schedules, and no child should have to face scary things alone. The casual way she describes going above and beyond her professional duties makes Miles's chest tight with admiration. In his world, People constantly calculate the cost-benefit ratio of their actions, weighing personal investment against potential return. But Abigail gives without keeping score, offers presence and comfort as naturally as breathing. "You're remarkable," he says, the words emerging before his internal filter can soften them into something more socially appropriate. Abigail's cheeks flush slightly, her eyes focused on her sandwich rather than meeting his gaze. "I'm just doing my job." "No," Miles says with quiet certainty. "Your job is providing medical care and patient education. Sitting with scared children during procedures, bringing coffee to exhausted parents, remembering every detail of every family situation, that's not your job. That's who you are." This time she does look at him, her brown eyes searching his face as if trying to determine whether his words are genuine or simply well-crafted flattery. Whatever she sees there seems to satisfy her, because her expression softens into something that might be trust. "Most people don't understand why I work so many extra hours," she says quietly. "They think I'm either a workaholic or a martyr, that I don't have enough of a life outside the hospital." "What do you think?" "I think." She pauses, considering her words carefully. "I think that love is action, not just feeling. And these children and families need someone to love them through their worst days, even if that someone is just their nurse who chooses to stay late and hold space for their fear." The simple profundity of her philosophy renders Miles temporarily speechless. Love as action rather than sentiment. Presence as a form of service. The choice to show up, again and again, for people who need someone to believe in their strength when they can't access it themselves. That's. He starts, then stops, realizing that no response could adequately honor what she's just shared. Naive? Abigail suggests with a self-deprecating smile. Idealistic? My sister Lillian says I give too much of myself to other people's problems. I was going to say beautiful, Miles says honestly. And maybe the most profound thing anyone's ever said to me about what it means to live a meaningful life. The silence that follows is charged with awareness, the air between them electric with growing attraction and emotional recognition. Miles finds himself studying the way the soft lighting catches the gold flecks in Abigail's eyes, the way her lips curve when she's thinking, the graceful movements of her hands as she sets down her coffee cup. "Miles," she says softly, and there's something in her voice that makes his pulse quicken. "Yes? Why are you really here? And don't say it's because you wanted to understand pediatric healthcare better. You could arrange private tours and formal presentations if that's what you were after." The directness of her question deserves an equally direct answer, but Miles finds himself struggling to articulate feelings that are still too new and overwhelming to fully understand. How does he explain that meeting her has shifted something fundamental in his understanding of what matters? How does he tell her that watching her work has made him question everything he thought he knew about success and purpose and the kind of man he wants to be? "Because," he says slowly, "yesterday in that elevator, for the first time in longer than I can remember, I met someone who saw me as just a person instead of a business opportunity or a networking contact or a net worth calculation. And today, watching you with those children, I realized that you don't just see people clearly, you bring out the best in them. You certainly brought out something in me that I didn't know was still there." Abigail's breathing has become slightly uneven, her eyes wide with something that looks like recognition mixed with vulnerability. "What did I bring out?" "The desire to be worthy of someone's good opinion," Miles admits. "The wish to matter for reasons that have nothing to do with money or power or professional achievement. The hope that maybe I could learn to love people the way you do, completely, without keeping score, without expecting anything in return." The confession hangs between them like a bridge, fragile but real, connecting two people from different worlds who've somehow found their way to each other across an impossible distance. "You already matter," Abigail says quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. "You mattered the moment you got down on that elevator floor to help with baby Emma. You mattered when you spent the morning reading to children who needed someone to care about their stories. You matter right now, sitting here, choosing to see me and this place as worth your time and attention. Something breaks open in Miles's chest at her words, years of accumulated doubt and self-criticism dissolving under the warmth of her acceptance. When was the last time someone had told him he mattered not for what he could provide or accomplish, but simply for who he was? They're sitting closer now, though neither could say exactly when that happened. Close enough that Miles can see the exhaustion and compassion and growing awareness in Abigail's expression, close enough to notice the way her pulse has quickened, close enough to feel the heat radiating from her skin. "Abigail," he says, her name a question and a prayer and a recognition all at once. "Yes? I know we barely know each other. I know this might be crazy. But I haven't been able to stop thinking about you since that elevator got stuck, and I don't think it's just because you're beautiful, though you are. I think it's because you make me want to be the kind of man who deserves someone like you." Her eyes search his face with an intensity that makes him feel transparent, as if she's reading not just his words but his intentions, his fears, his hopes for whatever might be possible between them. "Miles," she says slowly, "I need you to understand something. I don't date patients' families, and I don't get involved with hospital donors, and I especially don't get involved with wealthy men who might see me as some kind of charity case or noble cause. I don't see you as any of those things," Miles says quickly. "I see you as the most genuine person I've ever met, someone who's taught me more about courage and kindness in 2 days than I've learned in 34 years of life. But we come from such different worlds," Abigail continues, her voice carrying the weight of practical concerns and past experiences that have taught her to be careful with her heart. "You have board meetings and business deals and a life that operates on a completely different level than mine. How could something like this possibly work?" Miles considers her question seriously, acknowledging the very real obstacles that separate their daily realities. But sitting here in this consultation room, surrounded by evidence of her extraordinary compassion, looking into eyes that see straight through to his soul, those obstacles feel manageable rather than insurmountable. "I don't know," he admits honestly. "But I know that I've never met anyone who makes me want to figure it out more than you do. And I know that the most important things in life are rarely convenient or simple or easy to categorize." The silence that follows is filled with the distant sounds of the hospital continuing its work of healing, soft conversations between nurses, the quiet beeping of monitoring equipment, the whispered comfort being offered to families facing uncertain futures. It's a backdrop that seems to emphasize the preciousness of connection, the importance of not letting fear prevent the exploration of something that might be extraordinary. "Okay," Abigail says finally, her voice barely audible. "Okay? Okay, let's see where this goes," she clarifies, her brown eyes bright with a mixture of nervousness and anticipation. But slowly. Carefully. With full understanding that if this affects my work or makes any of my patients uncomfortable, it stops immediately. Miles nods, accepting her conditions without hesitation. "Whatever you need. Whatever makes you feel safe. And you need to understand that I'm not going to change who I am or what I care about for anyone, no matter how successful or charming they might be. I wouldn't want you to," Miles says with absolute sincerity. "The person you are right now, exactly as you are, is what makes this feel worth exploring." Abigail studies his face for another long moment, then nods slowly. "Then maybe we could start with coffee sometime when I'm not exhausted and covered in the emotional residue of other people's crises." "I would love that," Miles says, and realizes he's never meant anything more in his entire life. As they finish their impromptu dinner and prepare to leave the consultation room, Miles feels something fundamental shifting in his understanding of what he wants his life to look like. For years, he's measured success by external markers, stock prices and acquisition deals and the approval of people whose opinions ultimately don't matter to him. But sitting here with Abigail, watching her navigate the complexities of caring for seriously ill children with grace and determination and an endless supply of love, he's beginning to understand that real success might look like building a life around the things that make you want to be better than you are. And right now, nothing makes him want to be better than the woman walking beside him through these hospital corridors, her presence turning even the antiseptic environment into something that feels like possibility. Chapter 4. 3 weeks into what Miles has started thinking of as the most important relationship of his life, the universe decides to test exactly how much he's willing to sacrifice for love. The call comes at 6:30 on a Tuesday morning, jarring him awake in his penthouse apartment with the sharp insistence of genuine crisis. Danny Collins's name on the caller ID makes his stomach clench with familiar dread, but the tone in his rival's voice carries a smugness that's entirely new. "Good morning, Miles. I trust you're enjoying your new hobby?" Miles sits up in bed, immediately alert despite the early hour. "What are you talking about, Collins?" "Your charitable work at the Children's Hospital. Very touching, really. I particularly enjoyed the photos of you reading to sick children. So humanitarian of you." The words hit Miles like ice water. Photos. Danny has photos of him at the hospital, which means someone has been watching, documenting, preparing to weaponize his growing relationship with Abigail and the pediatric unit. "I don't know what game you're playing." "Oh, this isn't a game anymore, Miles. This is business." Danny's voice carries the satisfied purr of a predator who's finally cornered his prey. "You see, I've been having conversations with your shareholders, and they're concerned about your recent priorities. Spending company time on charity work, canceling important meetings for hospital visits, and most interesting of all, developing what appears to be a romantic relationship with a staff member at an institution that receives significant funding from Westbrook Industries." Miles's blood runs cold. The implication is clear. Danny is positioning his relationship with Abigail as a conflict of interest, a sign that he's lost focus on what's best for the company and its investors. "My personal life has nothing to do with." "Doesn't it?" Danny interrupts smoothly. "Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you're using company charitable donations to impress a woman. It looks like you're prioritizing your love life over your fiduciary responsibilities. And it definitely looks like someone who's lost the killer instinct that built Westbrook Industries into what it is today." The accusation lands like a physical blow, not because it's true but because Miles recognizes how easily it could be made to appear true. In the ruthless world of corporate politics, appearances matter more than reality, and perception can destroy careers faster than any actual wrongdoing. "What do you want, Collins?" "Step down as CEO, Danny says, his voice now carrying the crisp efficiency of someone delivering ultimatums. "Announce that you're pursuing other interests, your humanitarian work, perhaps, and endorse me as your replacement. Do it gracefully, and I'll make sure the transition is smooth. Fight me on this, and I'll make sure every business publication in the country knows that Miles Westbrook chose romance over responsibility. You can't force me out of my own company." "Can't I?" Danny's laugh is cold and calculating. 48 hours, Miles. That's how long you have to make the announcement. After that, I take this to the shareholders directly, along with some very interesting documentation about how your personal relationships are affecting your professional judgment." The line goes dead, leaving Miles staring at his phone with the growing realization that everything he's built is under direct threat. Not from market forces or economic downturns or any of the business challenges he's spent years learning to navigate, but from the simple fact that he's fallen in love with someone who makes him want to be better than the ruthless businessman his father raised him to be. He should be calculating responses, planning counter-strategies, thinking 5 moves ahead the way he's been trained to do since his first business course. Instead, he finds himself thinking about Abigail's smile when she talks to the children, about Connor's wisdom regarding courage coming in all sizes, about the way his heart feels lighter every time he walks into that hospital. The thought of losing all of that, of having his relationship with Abigail destroyed by corporate warfare, makes his chest tight with panic. But the thought of stepping down from Westbrook Industries, of letting Danny Collins destroy everything his father built, of proving that he really isn't strong enough to handle the responsibilities that come with success, that feels like a different kind of death entirely. His phone buzzes with a text from David, "Emergency board meeting called for this afternoon. Several major shareholders demanding attendance. What should I tell them?" Miles stares at the message, understanding that the battle Danny threatened has already begun. Whatever happens in that boardroom will determine not just the future of his company, but the future of his relationship with the only woman who's ever made him feel like the man he actually wants to be. The pediatric unit feels like a sanctuary when Miles arrives later that morning, its colorful walls and hopeful energy providing stark contrast to the corporate warfare brewing in his professional life. But even here, surrounded by children's laughter and the gentle efficiency of healing, he can't escape the weight of Danny Collins's ultimatum. 48 hours. 48 hours to choose between the company that represents his father's legacy and the woman who represents his own future. He finds Abigail in the family conference room, meeting with the parents of a teenage patient. Through the glass walls, he can see her explaining something complex with the kind of patient care that makes medical information feel manageable rather than overwhelming. Her hands move as she talks, illustrating points with gestures that somehow make even the scariest diagnoses feel survivable. Watching her work, Miles is struck again by the fundamental difference in their approaches to problem solving. Where he's been trained to see challenges as battles to be won, obstacles to be overcome through superior strategy and resources, Abigail sees them as puzzles to be solved through collaboration and compassion. The irony isn't lost on him that the very qualities that make her extraordinary, her integrity, her commitment to putting others first, her complete disinterest in personal gain, are the same qualities that Danny Collins is using to paint him as weak and unfocused. Miles? Her voice pulls him out of his spiraling thoughts. The meeting has ended, and she's approaching with the warm smile that's become the best part of his day. You're early. Everything okay? It's a simple question, the kind of casual check-in that happens between people who've started to care about each other's well-being. But the concern in her brown eyes makes Miles realize just how much he has to lose if Danny's plan succeeds. Can we talk? He asks, glancing around the busy unit. Somewhere private? Something in his tone makes her expression shift from warm to worried. Of course. Let me just check on Connor's treatment schedule, and then we can. Abigail. The urgency in his voice stops her mid-sentence. Please. This is important. She studies his face for a moment, reading the stress and barely controlled panic that he's trying unsuccessfully to hide. Without another word, she leads him to a small office used for private consultations, closing the door behind them and creating a bubble of quiet in the midst of the hospital's controlled chaos. What's wrong? She asks directly, settling into the chair across from him with the focused attention she usually reserves for medical emergencies. Miles looks into her eyes, those warm, honest brown eyes that see through every pretense and facade he's ever constructed. And realizes he has no idea how to explain that loving her might cost him everything he's worked for, or that losing his company might cost him the ability to be worthy of her love. There's something I need to tell you about my business, he begins slowly. About why I started volunteering here, about the hospital funding, about everything. Abigail's expression becomes carefully neutral, the professional mask she wears when preparing for difficult conversations. Okay. 3 years ago, Westbrook Industries started anonymously funding pediatric healthcare initiatives. Research grants, equipment purchases, facility improvements. This hospital received significant funding for the wing expansion and the new playroom equipment. He pauses, watching her face for signs of recognition or concern, but she simply nods for him to continue. I didn't tell you because I didn't want you to feel obligated to spend time with me, or to worry that your job might be affected by our relationship, or to think that I was using charity to manipulate you into caring about me. Are you? Abigail asks quietly. Using charity to manipulate me? No, Miles says immediately. God, no. The funding started long before I met you, and it continues because pediatric healthcare is important, not because I'm trying to impress anyone. But the perception that I might be using company resources for personal purposes is being used against me by someone who wants to destroy my career. He explains Danny Collins's threats, the shareholder concerns, the ultimatum that forces him to choose between his company and his personal life. As he talks, he watches Abigail's expression shift from confusion to understanding to something that looks like resignation. So this person, Danny Collins, is saying that your relationship with me is evidence that you're not fit to run your company? She asks when he finishes. He's saying that I've lost focus, that I'm prioritizing personal relationships over professional responsibilities, that my judgment has been compromised by emotional involvement. And what do you think? The question catches Miles off guard. He's been so focused on the external threat that he hasn't stopped to examine whether Danny's accusations contain any grain of truth. I think, he says slowly, that knowing you has changed my perspective on what success means. I think it's made me question whether building a business empire is worth it if that empire doesn't contribute to something meaningful. I think it's made me want to be the kind of man who deserves someone like you, even if that means being different from the kind of businessman my father expected me to be. Abigail is quiet for a long moment, her fingers tracing patterns on the desk surface as she processes what he's told her. When she finally looks up, her expression is sad but resolved. Miles, she says gently, I need you to listen to me very carefully. I care about you. More than I expected to, more than is probably wise given how little time we've known each other. But I will not be the reason you lose something you've worked your entire life to build. You're not. I am, she interrupts firmly. Maybe not directly, but your relationship with me is being used as a weapon against you. And that means every moment we spend together, every public appearance, every sign of our growing connection becomes ammunition for people who want to hurt you. Miles feels something cold and desperate rising in his chest. So what are you saying? I'm saying that we need to step back. Put some distance between us until this situation with your company is resolved. You need to focus on protecting your business and your employees and everything you've built, without worrying about how it affects us. The words hit Miles like a physical blow. Abigail, no. We can fight this together. I can handle Danny Collins and the shareholders and... Can you? She asks gently. Can you handle a corporate battle while worrying about protecting me from the fallout? Can you make the hard decisions that might be necessary to save your company if you're concerned about how those decisions affect our relationship? Miles wants to argue, wants to insist that he can compartmentalize personal and professional concerns the way he's been trained to do his entire career. But looking into Abigail's eyes, he recognizes the truth she's offering him. That love makes people vulnerable in ways that can be exploited, that caring about someone means their welfare becomes a factor in every decision, that the very thing that makes their relationship precious also makes it dangerous in the wrong hands. This is exactly what he wants, Miles says, his voice rough with frustration. Collins wants to drive us apart, wants to prove that caring about you makes me weak. Maybe it does make you weak, Abigail says quietly. Maybe love is supposed to make us weak in some ways. Maybe being willing to be vulnerable for someone else is the most human thing we can do. She reaches across the desk and takes his hand, her touch warm and reassuring despite the distance she's trying to create between them. But right now, you need to be strong in all the ways that business requires. You need to be calculating and strategic and willing to do whatever it takes to protect what you've built. And I need to not be a complication that makes those things harder for you. Miles stares down at their joined hands, memorizing the feeling of her skin against his, the way her touch makes everything else feel manageable. What if I don't want to be that kind of strong anymore? What if meeting you has shown me that there are more important things than winning corporate battles? Then you'll figure out how to be both, Abigail says with quiet confidence. You'll find a way to protect your company and honor your relationship with your father's memory and still be the man who reads stories to sick children. But you have to do it without worrying about me, without letting anyone use our connection as leverage against you. The terrible logic of her argument makes Miles's chest ache with loss and admiration in equal measure. Even in the face of losing their relationship, Abigail is thinking about what's best for him, about protecting his ability to fight for what matters without the additional burden of protecting her from the consequences. How long? He asks, his voice barely above a whisper. Until the situation is resolved. Until Danny Collins is no longer a threat and your position is secure. Until you can be certain that being with me won't cost you everything else you care about. And if that takes months? If this drags on indefinitely? Abigail's smile is sad but genuine. Then we'll find out how much this connection really means to both of us. If it's real, if it's as important as it feels right now, then it will survive some distance and some time. And if it doesn't? She doesn't finish the sentence, but the implication hangs between them like smoke. If their relationship can't survive the pressure of external challenges, then maybe it wasn't strong enough to last anyway. I hate this, Miles says finally. I hate that being with you is being used against me. I hate that caring about someone has become evidence of weakness instead of strength. I hate that we have to choose between love and everything else. We're not choosing between love and everything else, Abigail corrects gently. We're choosing to protect love by making sure it has the space and time it needs to grow into something that can't be destroyed by other people's ambitions. I'm loving the connection in these comments. Have you ever had to step back from something important to protect it? Tell me about a time when distance became an act of love. Share your experiences below. These stories of sacrifice and strength help us understand that sometimes the most loving thing we can do is let go temporarily. As they sit in the small office, surrounded by the quiet efficiency of healing and hope, Miles realizes that this conversation is teaching him something profound about the difference between weakness and strength. It would be weak to let Danny Collins destroy their relationship through manipulation and threats. But it takes a different kind of strength, the kind Abigail embodies every day, to step back from something precious in order to protect it. When this is over, he says, when I've dealt with Collins and secured the company and proven that I can be both successful and human. When this is over, Abigail agrees, we'll see where we are and what we both want and whether the time apart has made us more certain or less certain about what we're building together. They sit in silence for another moment, holding hands across the small desk while the hospital continues its work around them. Finally, Abigail glances at her watch and sighs. I should get back to my patients, she says. And you should get back to your corporate battle. But Miles? Yes? Win, she says fiercely. Not because losing would be unacceptable, but because you deserve to have everything you've worked for. You deserve to build the kind of company and the kind of life that honors both your father's legacy and your own values. And you deserve to do it without anyone making you feel like love is a liability instead of a strength. The conviction in her voice gives Miles something to hold on to as they separate, as he walks back through the hospital corridors that have become a second home, as he prepares to enter a boardroom where his entire future will be decided by people who measure worth in quarterly earnings rather than in the quality of comfort offered to frightened children. But as the elevator, a different elevator, one that works perfectly and carries him efficiently toward his waiting car, descends toward the parking garage, Miles carries with him something more valuable than any corporate strategy, the knowledge that he's found someone worth fighting for, even if fighting for her means temporarily fighting without her. The boardroom at Westbrook Industries feels like a gladiatorial arena when Miles walks in that afternoon, the tension so thick it's almost visible. 12 faces turn toward him as he enters, some sympathetic, others openly hostile, all calculating the potential impact of whatever decision they're about to make on their personal portfolios. Sandra Oakley is there, which surprises him. Their acquisition deal doesn't officially close for another month, and she has no voting rights in Westbrook Industries' internal governance. But her presence sends a clear message. The business community is watching this confrontation with keen interest, ready to judge not just his fitness to lead but the viability of any partnership with someone whose leadership is being questioned. Gentlemen. Ladies. Miles takes his seat at the head of the conference table with the calm authority he's cultivated over years of high-stakes negotiations. I understand there are concerns about my recent priorities and decision-making. I'm here to address those concerns directly. Are you? The voice belongs to Richard Morrison, a shareholder who's been questioning Miles's leadership since the company's humanitarian initiatives began cutting into profit margins. Because from where we sit, it looks like you've been more interested in playing nursemaid to sick children than running a multi-billion-dollar corporation." The casual cruelty in Morrison's characterization of pediatric healthcare makes Miles's jaw clench, but he keeps his voice level. "Our charitable initiatives represent less than 3% of annual profits and have generated significant positive publicity and tax advantages. They're sound business decisions that happen to align with personal values. Personal values that include romantic relationships with hospital staff," adds Margaret Chen, another shareholder whose expression suggests she's already made up her mind about his fitness to lead. How exactly does that serve the interests of this company? Miles had anticipated this line of attack, but hearing Abigail reduced to hospital staff, as if her expertise and dedication and fundamental goodness could be summarized by her employment status, makes something dangerous flare in his chest. "My personal relationships," he says carefully, "have no bearing on my professional competence or my commitment to this company's success. Don't they?" Danny Collins's voice cuts through the boardroom like a blade. Miles turns to see his rival standing in the doorway, invited by shareholders who clearly believe they need reinforcement for their coup attempt. "Because the Miles Westbrook I've competed against for the last decade wouldn't cancel board meetings to read stories to children. He wouldn't restructure acquisition deals to prioritize humanitarian concerns over profit maximization. And he certainly wouldn't let emotional attachments compromise his strategic thinking." Danny moves through the room with the predatory confidence of someone who believes victory is inevitable, taking a seat near the head of the table as if he already belongs there. "The question before this board," Danny continues, "is whether Miles Westbrook has lost the killer instinct that built this company. Whether he's become so distracted by playing humanitarian that he's forgotten his primary responsibility is to maximize shareholder value." "The primary responsibility of any CEO," Miles counters, "is to ensure the long-term sustainability and growth of the company. That includes maintaining ethical standards, building positive community relationships, and attracting top talent who want to work for an organization that stands for something more than just profit." "Pretty words," Morrison says dismissively. "But sentiment doesn't pay dividends. Heartwarming stories about sick children don't increase stock prices. And romantic entanglements with charitable recipients create liability issues that this board can't ignore." Miles feels the room shifting against him, shareholders who've supported him for years now questioning whether his recent changes in priorities represent evolution or weakness. He needs something more than philosophical arguments about corporate responsibility. He needs to prove that his approach isn't just morally superior but financially sound. "Richard," he says, turning to Morrison with the calm authority that served him well in countless negotiations, "what was our stock price when I took over as CEO 12 years ago?" Morrison glances at his tablet, clearly reluctant to provide information that might undermine his argument. $43 per share. "And our current stock price? $187 per share. So under my leadership, shareholders have seen a return of more than 400%, Miles continues. Our annual revenue has increased from $2 billion to $8 billion. We've expanded into 12 new markets and acquired 17 companies. Are you suggesting that this track record of success is somehow compromised by the fact that I've also chosen to use a small percentage of our profits to support children's healthcare?" The numbers create uncomfortable silence in the room. Whatever Miles's critics want to say about his recent priorities, they can't argue with results that have made every person at this table significantly wealthier. "Past performance doesn't guarantee future results," Chen says, but there's less conviction in her voice now. "The concern is whether your recent changes in perspective indicate that you're losing focus on what made you successful in the first place." "Past performance doesn't guarantee future results," Chen says, but there's less conviction in her voice now. "The concern is whether your recent changes in perspective indicate that you're losing focus on what made you successful in the first place." "What made me successful," Miles says quietly, "was the ability to see opportunities that others missed, to think strategically about long-term growth rather than just quarterly earnings, and to make decisions based on comprehensive analysis rather than emotional reactions." He pauses, looking around the table at faces that represent years of partnership and shared success. Those skills haven't diminished. If anything, they've been enhanced by broader perspective on what constitutes value creation. The children's hospital where I've been volunteering? It's become a testing ground for 3 new healthcare technologies that Westbrook Industries is developing. The relationships I've built there have led to partnerships with medical research institutions that will generate millions in revenue over the next 5 years. This is news to everyone in the room, including Danny Collins, whose confident expression begins to show cracks of uncertainty. The humanitarian initiatives that some of you see as distractions? Miles continues. They've attracted top talent who want to work for a company that aligns with their values. They've opened doors to international markets where corporate social responsibility is a prerequisite for partnership. They've generated tax advantages and positive publicity that would have cost millions to achieve through traditional marketing. Sandra Oakley leans forward slightly, her expression interested rather than hostile. Are you saying that your charitable work is actually a business strategy? I'm saying that business and social responsibility aren't mutually exclusive, Miles responds. The most successful companies of the next decade will be those that understand that stakeholder value includes more than just shareholder value. That employee satisfaction, community impact, and ethical standards are business assets, not business liabilities. He stands, moving to the window that overlooks the city where his company's success has been built, where his father's dreams have been exceeded beyond imagination. Danny is right about one thing, Miles continues. I'm not the same CEO I was 12 years ago. I'm better. I'm more strategic, more innovative, more connected to the kinds of partnerships and opportunities that will drive growth in an evolving marketplace. And yes, I'm more human. I see that as a strength, not a weakness. The room is quiet now, the earlier hostility replaced by something that feels like consideration. Miles realizes this is his moment, not to defend his choices, but to reframe them as evidence of evolution rather than deterioration. The board has a choice, he says, returning to his seat but remaining standing. You can replace me with someone who will run this company the way it was run in the past, focusing exclusively on short-term profit maximization and treating corporate social responsibility as an afterthought. Or you can trust the CEO who has delivered consistent growth and innovation for 12 years to continue adapting our strategies to meet the challenges and opportunities of the next 12 years. Danny Collins has been quietly furious throughout Miles's presentation, and now he stands with the sharp movements of someone whose carefully laid plans are unraveling. This is exactly the kind of manipulative rhetoric that proves my point, Danny says, his voice tight with barely controlled anger. Miles is trying to reframe personal weakness as business strategy, trying to convince you that his romantic entanglements and emotional decision-making are actually assets. But ask yourselves this. Do you want a CEO who makes decisions with his heart, or one who makes them with his head? I want a CEO who makes decisions with both, Sandra Oakley says quietly, speaking for the first time since the meeting began. Someone who has the analytical skills to evaluate opportunities and the emotional intelligence to understand what motivates people. Someone who can build partnerships based on mutual respect rather than just mutual benefit. She looks around the table, her expression calm but authoritative. I've spent the last month evaluating Westbrook Industries as a potential partner, and I can tell you that what impressed me most wasn't just the financial performance, though that's obviously important. It was the culture Miles has created, the way employees talk about their work with genuine enthusiasm, the way the company is positioned to attract the kind of talent that will drive innovation in the coming decades. Her endorsement carries weight in the room, reminding everyone that she represents not just another opinion but potential partnership worth hundreds of millions in future revenue. The question isn't whether Miles has changed, Sandra continues. The question is whether that change represents growth or decline. From where I sit, it looks like growth. It looks like a leader who's learned to think beyond quarterly earnings to long-term value creation. Morrison shifts uncomfortably in his seat, clearly recognizing that the momentum has turned against the coup attempt. The personal relationship issue remains, he says weakly. The potential conflict of interest, the appearance of impropriety. You mean the appearance that a successful CEO might actually care about the communities his company serves? Sandra asks with gentle irony. That he might have personal relationships with people who share his values? I'm struggling to see how that's a liability. Danny Collins makes one final attempt to regain control of the narrative. This is all very touching, but it ignores the fundamental question: is Miles Westbrook still capable of making the hard decisions that business requires? When personal considerations conflict with professional necessities, where do his loyalties lie? It's a fair question, and one that Miles has been wrestling with since Danny's threat began this crisis. But standing in this boardroom, surrounded by people whose livelihoods depend on his leadership, he realizes the answer has been clear all along. My loyalty, he says quietly, lies with building something sustainable and meaningful. Something that creates value for shareholders while also creating value for the communities we serve. Something that honors my father's legacy while also reflecting my own evolution as a leader. He looks directly at Danny, meeting his rival's hostile gaze with calm resolution. And if that means I have to fight harder and think smarter and work more strategically to protect what I've built, then that's what I'll do. Not because I've become weak, but because I've finally found something worth being strong for. The vote, when it comes, isn't even close. 10-2 in favor of maintaining Miles's leadership, with only Morrison and Chen dissenting. Danny Collins leaves without speaking, his attempt at corporate coup dissolved by Miles's ability to demonstrate that love and strategy aren't mutually exclusive. But as the boardroom empties and shareholders shake hands and express renewed confidence in the company's direction, Miles feels the weight of what he's accomplished shadowed by the knowledge of what it's cost him. He's won the battle for his company, proved that his evolution as a leader represents growth rather than weakness, demonstrated that caring about more than profit doesn't make him unfit to lead. But the victory feels hollow without Abigail there to share it, without the ability to call her and tell her that their relationship has been vindicated rather than vilified. The irony isn't lost on him that in fighting to prove he could be both successful and human, he's had to temporarily sacrifice the relationship that taught him the value of being human in the first place. As he stands alone in the boardroom, looking out at the city lights that twinkle like earthbound stars, Miles realizes that winning this battle was only the beginning. Now he has to prove that the man who fought for the right to love openly is worthy of the woman who taught him what love actually means. And somewhere across the city, in a pediatric unit where children are learning about courage and hope, Abigail Mitchell is probably working another double shift, caring for other people's children while the man who wants to build a future with her fights to create space for that future to exist. The distance between them feels vast and necessary and absolutely unbearable, all at the same time. Chapter 5. 6 weeks of strategic distance feels like 6 years when you're missing someone who's become essential to your understanding of what makes life worth living. Miles throws himself into proving that his victory in the boardroom wasn't just political maneuvering but the beginning of a new chapter in how Westbrook Industries operates in the world. The healthcare technology partnerships he'd mentioned during the board meeting become reality with aggressive efficiency. The pediatric monitoring systems his company develops are tested first at the Children's Hospital where Abigail works, creating improvements in patient care that generate both medical breakthroughs and substantial revenue. The international expansion into markets that value corporate social responsibility opens doors that had been closed to purely profit-driven competitors. But success feels hollow when you can't share it with the person who inspired you to redefine what success means in the first place. Miles keeps tabs on Abigail through carefully indirect channels, conversations with Dr. Hamilton about hospital operations, updates from Robert in volunteer services, brief glimpses during his continued visits to read to the children. She's thriving professionally, recently promoted to lead a new family advocacy program that provides support to parents navigating complex medical decisions. Every report of her success makes him proud and heartsick in equal measure. The children ask about him constantly, according to Connor, who's now in remission and has become an unofficial messenger between the adults who are too stubborn or too scared to communicate directly. Abby misses you, Connor tells him during one of their reading sessions, with the matter-of-fact directness that only 6-year-olds can manage. She tries to pretend she doesn't, but she always looks sad when someone mentions your name. I miss her too, Miles admits, because lying to Connor has always felt impossible. Very much. Then why don't you just tell her that? It's such a reasonable question, delivered with such logical simplicity, that Miles doesn't know how to explain that adult relationships are complicated by pride and timing and the fear that too much has changed during their time apart. Sometimes, he tells Connor, adults make things harder than they need to be. That's dumb, Connor observes with devastating accuracy. 2 weeks later, Danny Collins surfaces in the business news with an announcement that he's joining Morrison Industries as their new CEO, brought in to implement a more aggressive growth strategy. The move is clearly designed as revenge against Miles personally and Westbrook Industries generally, but it also represents an opportunity. With Danny no longer actively working to destroy his reputation and Morrison Industries now committed to a partnership with his primary rival, Miles has breathing room to focus on the long-term vision he'd outlined to the board rather than constant defensive maneuvering. More importantly, the external threats that had made his relationship with Abigail a liability have dissipated. There's no longer any strategic reason for them to maintain distance, no corporate justification for sacrificing personal happiness to professional necessity. The realization should fill him with relief and anticipation. Instead, it terrifies him. Because what if the time apart has shown Abigail that her life is simpler without the complications that come with loving someone whose world operates by different rules than hers? What if she's decided that the stress of their first crisis isn't worth the risk of future crises? What if the space they created to protect their relationship has instead revealed that the relationship isn't as essential as they'd thought? The fear keeps him paralyzed for another week, going through the motions of corporate leadership while obsessing over scenarios that all end with Abigail politely but firmly explaining that they want different things from life. It's Tyler who finally provides the perspective that cuts through his spiral of anxiety. You know what the difference is between brave people and scared people? Tyler asks during one of their conversations in the hospital playroom. He's 12 now, officially in remission, but still returns regularly to mentor younger patients who are just beginning their own battles with serious illness. What's the difference? Miles asks, grateful for any wisdom that might help him figure out how to move forward. Brave people are scared too, Tyler explains with the authority of someone who's faced down more fear than most adults ever will. They just don't let being scared stop them from doing what matters. The observation hits Miles like revelation. He's been so focused on the possibility of rejection that he's forgotten the larger truth Tyler learned during his cancer treatment. That courage isn't the absence of fear but the decision to act in spite of fear. And the thing that matters most, more than corporate success or shareholder approval or any of the external markers of achievement he spent his life pursuing, is the woman who taught him that love is action, not just feeling. The grand opening of the new Pediatric Family Support Center happens on a Thursday morning in late spring, when the hospital gardens are blooming with the kind of hope that makes even the most sterile medical environment feel alive with possibility. Miles arrives early, ostensibly to participate in the ribbon-cutting ceremony as one of the center's primary funders, but really because he knows Abigail will be there and he's finally ready to stop letting fear make his decisions for him. The center itself is a marvel of thoughtful design, created through collaboration between medical professionals, child development experts, and the families who will use its services. There are quiet spaces for difficult conversations, play areas where siblings can be children while their brothers or sisters receive treatment, resource libraries stocked with information that helps parents navigate impossible choices, and support group rooms where families can connect with others who understand their struggles. But the centerpiece is a memorial wall where families can honor children who've lost their battles with illness, a space that acknowledges grief while celebrating the love that makes grief possible. Miles studies the wall during the pre-ceremony gathering, reading names and dates and brief descriptions of lives that were too short but not without meaning. The wall exists because of his funding, but it was designed and implemented by people like Abigail who understand that healing requires acknowledgement of loss as well as celebration of recovery. It's beautiful, isn't it? Her voice comes from behind him, soft and familiar and exactly what he's been missing for the last 6 weeks. Miles turns to find Abigail standing a few feet away, wearing a dress the color of ocean waves that makes her brown eyes look like gold-flecked amber. "It's perfect," he says, meaning both the memorial wall and the sight of her after weeks of careful distance. "You did an incredible job with the design." "We all did," Abigail corrects, but her smile suggests she's pleased by his praise. The families who contributed their stories, the artists who created the visual elements, the construction team who worked weekends to get it finished on schedule, it was truly collaborative. They stand together in comfortable silence, reading names and remembering children who've become angels while other children continue fighting to become survivors. The weight of what this place represents, hope and loss intertwined, love made manifest in physical space, creates intimacy between them that feels both familiar and fragile. "Miles," Abigail says quietly, "I heard about the board meeting. About Danny Collins joining Morrison Industries. I'm glad you were able to resolve everything." "Are you?" he asks, turning to study her face for signs of what she's really thinking. "Glad that the obstacles to our relationship have been removed?" The directness of his question makes her breath catch slightly, her eyes widening with something that might be hope or might be anxiety. "I'm glad you don't have to choose between your company and your personal life anymore," she says carefully. "That was an impossible position, and you handled it with more grace than I would have managed." "That's not what I asked," Miles says gently. "I asked if you're glad that we can stop pretending we don't miss each other." Abigail's composure cracks slightly, revealing the vulnerability she's been hiding behind professional distance. "Miles. I know we agreed to wait until the situation was resolved," he continues, stepping closer to her in the quiet alcove where the memorial wall creates privacy from the gathering crowd. "I know we said we'd see where we were when the external pressures were gone. But I need you to know where I am." He takes a breath, gathering courage the way Tyler taught him, acknowledging the fear while refusing to let it control his choices. "I'm completely, hopelessly in love with you," he says simply. "Not because you're convenient or available or good for my image, but because you've shown me what it means to live with purpose beyond personal achievement. Because you make me want to be worthy of the faith you have in human goodness. Because being with you feels like coming home to a version of myself I never knew existed." Abigail's eyes fill with tears that she doesn't try to hide, her professional composure completely abandoned in favor of raw honesty. "The last 6 weeks have been the longest of my life," she admits. "Not just because I missed you, but because everything I accomplished felt incomplete without being able to share it with you. Every success, every small victory with the children, every moment that should have been joyful just reminded me that the person I most wanted to celebrate with wasn't there. So where does that leave us?" Miles asks, though his heart is already singing with relief at her confession. "It leaves us," Abigail says, stepping closer until they're breathing the same air, "exactly where we were in that elevator 6 weeks ago. Two people who found each other in an unexpected place and discovered something worth fighting for. The kiss, when it happens, is soft and careful and full of all the longing they've been carrying separately." Miles's hands cradle her face like she's something precious and fragile, while Abigail's arms circle his neck with the strength of someone who's finally allowing herself to hold onto what she wants. When they break apart, both breathing harder than the gentle kiss should warrant, Miles realizes that the memorial wall behind them provides the perfect backdrop for this moment of reunion. Not because their love is about death or loss, but because it's about the courage to love fully despite the knowledge that nothing precious is guaranteed to last. "So what happens now?" Abigail asks, her voice slightly unsteady with emotion and possibility. "Now," Miles says, "we stop making things more complicated than they need to be. We figure out how to build something together that honors both of our commitments and values. We let ourselves be happy without constantly waiting for the other shoe to drop. And if people criticize our relationship, or try to use it against you professionally?" Miles considers the question seriously, understanding that the threat of external judgment will always exist in some form. But looking into Abigail's face, feeling the rightness of her presence beside him, he realizes that no external opinion could outweigh the internal certainty that loving her has made him better at everything else he does. Then we deal with it together, he says simply. As partners who trust each other enough to face whatever challenges come our way. The ribbon-cutting ceremony begins shortly after, with speeches from hospital administrators and grateful families and community leaders who understand the significance of creating spaces where healing extends beyond medical treatment to encompass emotional and spiritual support. But for Miles, the most important moment comes when Dr. Hamilton introduces him not as a philanthropist or business leader, but as someone who understands that the best investments are the ones that create value for everyone involved. Miles Westbrook represents a new model of corporate leadership, Dr. Hamilton says to the gathered crowd. Someone who recognizes that business success and social responsibility aren't competing priorities but complementary strategies for creating sustainable value. The applause is warm and genuine, but Miles barely hears it. His attention is focused on Abigail, who's standing near the front of the crowd with Connor and Tyler and several other children whose lives have been improved by the collaborative work between Westbrook Industries and the hospital. When their eyes meet across the space filled with people celebrating shared accomplishment, Abigail's smile carries all the promise of a future built on love that's been tested and proven resilient. 3 months later, Miles stands in the same pediatric playroom where he first learned to read stories to children who taught him more about courage than any business school ever could. But today's gathering isn't about story time or therapeutic play. Today, he's here to make an announcement that represents the synthesis of everything he's learned about leadership, love, and the kind of legacy worth building. The Westbrook Foundation for Pediatric Innovation, he explains to the assembled group of families, medical staff, and community leaders, will be the largest privately funded initiative for children's healthcare research and family support services in the country. The foundation represents more than charitable giving, it's a complete restructuring of how his personal wealth will be deployed, a commitment to ensuring that financial success serves purposes larger than personal accumulation. But more importantly, Miles continues, glancing toward Abigail, who's standing near the back of the room with the quiet pride of someone who's watched him grow into the leader she always believed he could become. It represents a partnership between Westbrook Industries and the medical professionals who've taught us that true innovation happens when business acumen meets genuine compassion. He explains the foundation's goals: funding research into rare pediatric diseases, providing scholarships for healthcare workers who want to specialize in children's medicine, creating family support programs that recognize parents as partners in the healing process, and developing technology that makes high-quality pediatric care accessible to underserved communities. But the most significant announcement comes last. Dr. Abigail Mitchell has agreed to serve as the Foundation's Director of Family Services, Miles says, his voice carrying the professional respect that makes her appointment credible while his eyes carry the personal love that makes it meaningful. Her expertise in pediatric nursing and her intuitive understanding of what families need during medical crises make her the ideal person to ensure that our resources are deployed in ways that create real, lasting impact. The applause that follows is enthusiastic and sustained, recognition of both Abigail's qualifications and the partnership that has created something larger than either of them could have accomplished alone. Later, after the presentations and congratulations and detailed conversations about implementation timelines, Miles and Abigail find themselves alone in the family conference room where they'd first acknowledged their feelings for each other. So, Abigail says with a smile that combines professional satisfaction with personal happiness, "We're really doing this. Building something together." "We're really doing this," Miles confirms, reaching for her hand with the easy familiarity that's developed over months of learning to navigate their relationship alongside their shared professional commitments. "Any regrets about restructuring your entire philanthropic approach around pediatric healthcare?" Miles considers the question, thinking about the foundation that will consume significant portions of his time and resources, about the shift from writing checks to being personally involved in every aspect of how his wealth is deployed for social good. "Only one," he says finally. "Which is that it took me 34 years and a broken elevator to figure out that the best return on investment isn't financial, it's knowing that your work makes other people's lives better." Abigail's smile becomes luminous with love and pride and shared commitment to building something that honors both of their values. "Well," she says, leaning closer until their foreheads touch, "some of the best discoveries happen by accident. The important thing is recognizing them when they happen and having the courage to follow where they lead." Outside the conference room, the pediatric unit continues its work of healing and hope. Children learn to be brave, parents learn to trust medical expertise while advocating for their children's needs, and healthcare workers like Abigail continue choosing service over self-interest because they understand that love is action, not just feeling. And in a few minutes, Miles and Abigail will join that work, stepping into a future they've built together through the simple recognition that the most meaningful achievements are always collaborative, always focused on creating value for others, always grounded in the belief that human connection is both the means and the end of any work worth doing. The foundation will grow and evolve, funding research that saves lives and supporting families through their most difficult moments. Westbrook Industries will continue to prosper, but now with a clear understanding that business success without social impact is ultimately hollow. And two people who met in a broken elevator will continue learning that love is strongest when it's focused outward, when it becomes the foundation for building something larger than either person could create alone. As they prepare to leave the conference room and rejoin the celebration outside, Abigail pauses to look back at the space where so many difficult conversations have taken place, where families have received devastating news and made impossible decisions and found strength they didn't know they possessed. "You know what I love most about this room?" she asks. "What?" "It's where people learn that they're stronger than they thought. That they can handle things they never imagined they'd have to face. That love gives them courage they didn't know they had." Miles understands that she's talking about more than just the families who've sat in these chairs dealing with medical crises. She's talking about their own journey from strangers trapped in an elevator to partners building a future neither could have envisioned alone. "So," he says, extending his hand toward the woman who's taught him that the best elevator rides are the ones that break down in exactly the right place at exactly the right time, "ready to see what kind of strength we can build together?" "Ready," Abigail says, taking his hand and stepping with him toward whatever comes next, knowing that the most important destinations are always reached by traveling together. The elevator that carries them down to the main lobby works perfectly, delivering them smoothly and efficiently to the ground floor where their car is waiting to take them to the foundation offices where they'll spend the evening planning programs that will touch thousands of lives. But as the doors close behind them and they descend toward their shared future, both Miles and Abigail understand that the most important journey they'll ever take started in a broken elevator between floors, in a moment of mechanical failure that revealed the possibility of human connection deep enough to transform everything they thought they knew about love, purpose, and what it means to build a life worth living. What unexpected moment in your life led to the biggest change? Have you ever found love in the most unlikely place? Share your stories below. I love hearing how life surprises us with exactly what we need when we least expect it. Sometimes the wrong elevator is exactly the right place to be. Sometimes getting lost is how we find our way home. And sometimes, the person who changes our life forever is standing right there in the space between floors, waiting for us to have the courage to see what's been there all along. Miles Westbrook learned that success isn't measured by what you accumulate but by what you contribute. Abigail Mitchell learned that love doesn't require choosing between personal happiness and professional purpose. Sometimes it creates opportunities to honor both more fully than either could be honored alone. And together, they learned that the most meaningful elevators are the ones that carry you not just between floors, but between who you used to be and who you're brave enough to become. If this story touched your heart, please hit that like button and let me know in the comments what resonated most with you. Don't forget to subscribe for more passionate love stories that remind us all that the heart wants what it wants, regardless of circumstances. Tomorrow brings another tale of unexpected love, and I can't wait to share it with our beautiful Dear Love Diaries family.